Anywho, it seems I might be stuck level grinding for several more minutes. I need to get these two guys up to level 16. Hopefully Heracross learns a fighting type move. That'd be real nice. But in the meantime, I'm actually going to move on to the main event, as it were. Get ready for content. Bam! Look at that. Haha. I got it cropped and everything. Okay, so here we go. On the description here, we've got some details from what I can expect. Join us as Cenk Uygur debates live streamer Destiny. They'll discuss Biden's presidency, money in politics, lobbying, Kyle Rittenhouse, and more. All right, let's go. I'm going to turn the audio down a little bit. Oh, what a jam. Oh, dude, you can see the chat on the side of the screen there. All right, so this is a preview. Let me fast forward to when the debate gets started. Oh, I may have fast forwarded too far. There we go. So for those of you not in the loop, the Young Turks is, well, I don't know what degree to still consider them progressive, because I don't watch them anymore ever since Anna did the thing about the whole birthing person, whatever. But, you know, liberal news outlet, who has had some left-wing opinions. They've had some less agreeable opinions, at least in my view. And Destiny is a liberal live streamer. He does political content while playing video games, kind of like what I do. In fact, I was inspired by the format to a degree. You know, I don't agree with all of his political takes. In fact, I disagree with quite a lot of them, but should be good content, because I saw that this debate got a lot of attention when it first dropped. But yeah, this was early June. I'm seeing on my other tab here.
Cool. Well, I guess everything's live.
Nice.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, hey, what's up, guys? Obviously, I'm Destiny.
Let me.
Steve Bunnell. This is my good friend, colleague. I don't even know what to call you, honestly. I mean, you guys all know I'm from the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur. Yeah, how you doing today?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm so curious. What was like?
I think that should be good, right? Let me know. Let me know if there are any issues, if the audio is too loud on their end or too quiet. You know, I can see the green bar on my end. I can see whether it's in the green or in the yellow or in the red, but that still doesn't give me the greatest idea of how it compares to my voice coming through the microphone. So, just a heads up.
Like the impetus for this conversation. What do they tell you? What are we gearing up for here?
So I hear that you are evil and need to be defeated. Okay. No, Brianna Wu runs Rebellion Pack, and that's the pack that I started, and that's to get money to progress.
Destiny is evil, confirmed. He said it. Debate over. It's just a black screen. Pay no attention to the
progressives, so they can beat establishment Democrats, and ultimately, most importantly, beat Republicans. And so it was her suggestion, and I was like, okay, sure, let's do it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess I'll start. Are you familiar at all with anything that I do, or have you heard about any of my internet presence or anything? Or
yes, but I learned the hard way never to trust anything on the internet.
That's, okay, good starting place. Okay.
So
basically,
So, Steven, I'll just say, look, I know that some people say, oh, don't platform X, don't platform Y, don't go on here, don't go on there. Did you know what he said back when he was 17 or 37? And yeah, no, I don't care about any of that. Okay, so we're gonna have this discussion. And so if you've got something particularly terrible thing to say, or I do, we'll correct each other. Okay, so God bless.
Seems like Chad is alluding to some drama with Hassan. I don't know, I guess they don't like each other. Well, not I guess. I know that Destiny and Hassan and their communities do not like each other. But you know, I don't know. I'm assuming this is all, you know, in good fun between two fellas leading up to a debate.
And so. I hear you're, you know, what do I hear about you? I hear you're an establishment hack.
Yes, proudly so. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Nice. Okay, so it seems we've got the main political difference established here. I think that initially I actually wasn't super aware of what the difference between their political positions would be. It seems like Cenk, while he is a liberal, is more of a populist liberal, and Destiny is not a populist liberal. He's not a fan of the populism very much. It's a establishment hack, self-proclaimed. Many people are saying this.
I was just curious so that I know how to catch us all up. So the long and short of it is basically, I got into doing online politics around 2016 with the era of Trump, along with apparently the entire United States got into politics more in that time period than ever before.
That's true.
When I first came on the scene, my whole political career was being as combative as possible, combative, condescending, patronizing, and through that kind of like blood sports battling as like a left-leaning commentator. I kind of cut my teeth doing that for a while, became kind of popular online doing online politics, and now I've kind of shifted away towards like, how can I be more empathetic, understanding, and like really hone in on why do we disagree with people politically, and then what can I do to kind of push my message while still understanding, I guess, the concerns of the other side. Broadly speaking, that's what I do.
So, yeah, he like Destiny. Funnily enough, he did start as like the answer that from the left to the whole like right-wing blood sports debate shit. Because if you weren't on the internet back then, it was really bad. Like the term debate bro now means something much more benign, even when it's used in a derogatory context, than back in like 2016. It was a veritable hellscape. And, again, Destiny could probably testify to this. If you are a left-wing content creator on YouTube especially, you get invited onto a right-wing podcast just to have like 8 of them ambush you and do this thing where it's like they just bulldoze you. They just talk and talk and talk and talk like a gish gallop. They would yell at you and like you just don't get a word in. It's just a like big rhetorical dog pile. And so Destiny took the approach of like, well, he's genuinely debating here. It's 1 versus 1, and it's based on like at least at its core, the validity of the ideas being discussed. But he adopted the very, very vitriolic aesthetic, I guess, styling of the right wing from back in the day, to basically say, hey, idiots, you don't have a monopoly on this. I can do it too. And it's gonna be a lot different when the shoe's on the other foot, and I'm making you look bad from the left. And it worked. It actually really worked. It moved the online politics space, at least momentum-wise. It started up a trend where left-wing people got a little bit more comfortable. Like, and then now we're in a phase where there are a lot of content creators that do a similar format, at least, to Destiny. We've got Vaush, who is a socialist and does this. We've got Shark300, also a socialist, also does this sort of thing. Although they don't do debates quite as much as they used to, for a few different reasons. Just a quick little online history spiel.
But I try to actually do that, not like in a Dave Rubin centrist kind of way where you pretend to listen to both sides, but really you're just a conservative in disguise in every single sense of the word. Okay.
Steven, I'll give you credit from the get-go that from the few things that I've seen, you appear to be an actual independent thinker. So you're not like the fake left for sure, and your opinions are so all over the place that you can't help that they're genuine. So
I'll take that as a compliment. I'm not entirely sure, but it is a compliment to everybody, but sure.
By the way, there you go. If you saw, or maybe were like paying attention with the audio cues, this is exactly why I wanted to have Mankey for this gym, because you can just you just fighting type just wins. So long as I don't get one shot by Earthquake, which is generally not preferred.
By the way, the way that I look at these, we call them debates, but I really, in my mind, I view them as discussions, because there's plenty of things that I'm sure we'll agree on, right?
Sure.
And things that we'll disagree on, and that'll be fun too. And like I remember going to the debate in the political union in undergrad, and I didn't want the debate club because I'm like, oh, we're debating cats or dogs. Well, you're just trying to prove who's more clever, right? Let's get the policy. Let's figure out where we both stand, and then let the audience decide.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that I kind of bring up when I'm making the rounds on, I got into a little fight with Alex Jones on a panel, I think a couple months ago. I've done Tim Pool's show a couple times. One of the questions that I'm starting to hone in on a lot when I talk to people is, after you've said your spiel, you've said your piece, you've gone on your diatribe, your rant, you've explained your issues, what do you want people at home to do? One of the things I'm kind of looking at for a lot of political discourse is, it feels like that the way that a lot of it is set up is, from the very beginning to the very end, there's this air of hopelessness. On the conservative side, depending on how conservative you go, it's Jewish people controlling the Great Replacement, and immigration is getting rid of us, and everybody's controlling the state-run media, the swamp, et cetera, which basically leaves their constituents with what do we have to do? January 6th, Buffalo shooter, it's extremist rhetoric. All we can do is fight with weapons. That's the only thing we can do. And on the left, I kind of notice sometimes that depending on what we're talking about, and then I get this vibe kind of from the Young Turks, that depending on what we're talking about, the rhetoric feels similar-ish. Giving you credit, you've said explicitly multiple times, don't bring weapons to riots, don't bring weapons to protests, it's not a good idea. But sometimes when it feels like we get so down on everybody, even establishment Democrats, that it's geez, it feels like there's no hope. If Biden didn't pass something that the most progressive person in Congress wants, then it's a watered down bipartisan garbage bill that he gets no credit for. And then kind of, I guess the ground for this discussion, I guess, can be the recent debt ceiling negotiation. But we can talk about the infrastructure bill, the American Rescue Plan.
Okay, so he's getting into the more particulars of what they're going to debate. But I will say that, for how much I would disagree with him as a liberal, he is correct. There are some elements of the left that are so opposed to reformism that they seek, obviously you should seek out opportunities for direct action, but there are elements of the online left that are not doing that in a healthy way, that are sort of Fed posting, as it were. Posting stuff that might put you on a list, or at least earn you the eye of some policing group somewhere, like the FBI, or maybe even just the local cops. And while obviously Destiny and I have very different policy objectives, and political objectives and stuff, it is true that we shouldn't discount electoralism and, or rather reformism more broadly, as a way to achieve certain ends. There are a lot of things, not necessarily when you get to a certain point when you're considering whether or not to, or when you're considering how to breach capitalism and start implementing more socialist politics, reformism starts being less useful. But if you're looking to sort of maximize the amount of progress you can get before you need to do that, to build a strong social democracy, reformism is absolutely very useful. There's, with the stroke of the pen, you can do a lot of stuff. You can't just do socialism with the stroke of the pen, but there is a lot that you can do.
And on whatever other thing, I guess, what is your general feeling of that? Is there any part of you that's you know what? He might not be the most progressive president ever. I think he is, but he might not be the most progressive president ever, but at least Biden did this or this in terms of major legislation. Do you have that feeling, or?
I hadn't put thought to it before. But Destiny might be right. No, wait. I think there's one president. This could be me not being super well read on American history. And again, this is kind of splitting hairs. But I think Jimmy Carter was a bit more progressive, at least considering the relative to his time, than Joe Biden is now. I guess in that sense, if we're going just purely by their politics out of the broader context, I think Joe Biden is the most progressive in terms of the positions he would ascribe to himself and whatever. But I think in terms of actions, Jimmy Carter might be more progressive than Biden. Because I'm remembering how much Jimmy Carter did for the environmentalist movement back in the day that Joe Biden really has not done. In fact, Joe Biden has acted to the detriment of the environmentalist movement. Although, likewise, you could counter with that Joe Biden has been very good for the queer community, and he's been very willing to have queer activists to the White House. I'm sure people saw in the news that there was people got mad that there was a trans woman at the White House with this trans activist group, and I don't know, she went topless for however long, and they were like, oh no, she showed her booba, even though right-wingers pretend to think that trans women are actually men. Anyways, sorry, splitting hairs. I'm gonna get back to the debate.
Yes and no. But it's a great question to start on. So, first off, look, if you come looking for hope, you've come to the right place.
Okay.
I'm the king of hope. And I even wrote a poem called Hope. Okay. So, and our audience knows I am intensely optimistic. And so when I get
you wrote a poem,
what I do is I try to fix it.
That's crazy.
And we do active things in the world, like we created Justice Democrats. We launched it on the Young Turks. We launched the improbable campaign of AOC, and nobody thought
that is true. By the way, I need to remember. I think everybody needs to remember for the Young Turks being kind of cringe lately, and for their sort of falling behind on social issues, it seems, particularly with like trans rights and stuff. They are responsible for a lot of the or at least in part responsible for a lot of the advancement that has been made towards more left-leaning politics in the United States. You know, for example, they did have a role in getting AOC elected, as well as other progressive politicians that are in the national legislature, as well as politicians that are in the in certain state legislatures, I think. I don't know. It's possible that they focus more on just national politics, but yeah, these are definitely accomplishments that I would attribute to TOIT as genuine successes.
But that was possible, and we did it. And then when we started Just Democrats, everybody thought you'd be lucky to get one. Now we have 11 in Congress, right? So I 100% believe in hope. Ro Khanna was on the show today on the Young Turks.
Although, it is worth mentioning that Cenk is no longer part of the Justice Democrats. He was a founder, but I think there were some controversies about his political views, either at the time or former political views. No, I think it might have been like his views on homeless people, as he was like in the running for Congress in California or something, that got him booted out of his own org. So he's not without his problems, but anyway, back to the debate.
Talking about what we can do to fight forward. Okay. Now, in terms of the Biden, no, look, if you say, hey, is there things that he's done well? Oh, absolutely. So here are a laundry list of things I'll give him credit for. Getting out of Afghanistan. And I did not agree with corporate media.
That's true.
It was a mess. It was terrible. They always say that when we're ending a war. They never say it when we're starting a war, right? So no, I'm thrilled that Biden got us out of Afghanistan. Did Trump start that process? He did. So what? Biden finished it, right? And he did it right away.
True. Biden does deserve a lot of credit for that.
The infrastructure bill is good in the long run. I have a giant asterisk on it, but I'll take it. Even the semiconductor bill,
infrastructure,
it's a giant giveaway to the semiconductor industry, but we do need a national semiconductor industry. So it's a complicated one. It's nuanced, right? The COVID relief bill had some of the provisions that helped the average American the most out of any bill I've covered in like 20 years, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of that already sunset and was obliterated later on. So I can go on and on.
Right, that's one of the biggest flaws, I think. I would actually consider that a point against Biden, funnily enough, is that, or at least a point against the Democratic Party at large, at the federal level, is that they did not meaningfully revisit programs that were started as like COVID relief things to make them permanent, because that bill was amazing for the short while that it existed. The problem was just that it was temporary. You know, I think that like if that bill was made permanent, we've already taken a pretty significant step towards a functioning social democracy. Like that's, you know, there are a lot of check boxes, and that's actually one of them out of the way. The problem is we uncheck the box later. You know.
Right, but in terms of, is Biden a progressive? Absolutely not. Has he done enough? Absolutely not. Okay, and so it's not me being nihilistic to say
that. I'll agree with.
Credit where credit is due, and then discredit where discredit is due. So
I think, yeah, okay. So to clarify, I think it could be true that Biden is the most progressive president in American history, but I do still think it's true that he's not a progressive, right? He's still a kind of a milquetoast liberal, even if he has a more progressive, comparatively more progressive policy positions now. I would think that, like, it seems like the degree to which he is unwilling to act on those prescriptions as the president of the United States is a little bit disqualifying. Although again, this could partly be because I don't have a frame of reference. Like if Bernie Sanders or somebody were president.
For example, and I can give you many, but let's start here. So Stephen, he said like $15 minimum wage was like bare minimum. Oh, of course we were going to get that. I remember when he got into office, and I told legislators, I said people on air, our audience, etc., they're not going to do it, and everybody was incredulous.
Yeah, credit where it's due.
He promised that 8 weeks to Sunday. He's definitely going to do it. And what did he do? He had his 2 Delaware senators that are his top allies in the Senate vote against it. He came out and spoke during the Super Bowl interview against it. He was never going to do it. He was lying all along. He's been a conservative on economic issues for 50 straight years. And I can go down a laundry list of things he was never going to do. Paid family leave.
Okay, Cenk's getting into a lot of other policies here, but like, this is a very strong argument. Cenk kind of fumbled it a little bit at the end, but yes. He definitely, Joe Biden definitely said, like, yes, $15 minimum wage is something I will do. And then instantly didn't fight for it at all. You know, as the president, people kind of forget, or maybe they just don't want to acknowledge as much, if, you know, people who are on the liberal side of things, is that the president does have some policymaking power. There are executive orders that you can sign, granted that those are limited, but you can also write a bill text, have your cabinet or your advisors write a bill text to then give to somebody in the House or the Senate, say, hey, introduce this to try to get it passed. You know, the president has a lot of agenda setting power. He's on TV a lot of the time. He can bring this stuff up if he views it as a priority. And Cenk is right. Joe Biden does not see that as a priority. And I could even add a supporting point to back that up, which is that, like, Joe Biden broke the rail union strike in late 2022. You know, which is indicative, I think, of where Joe Biden stands on the economic issues. He's very much a neoliberal, doesn't care that much about workers' rights and the sort of working conditions that people endure day to day. Yeah, but he understood ultimately that he does have to cater to that audience if he wants their votes. Like, he has to give them a bone, even if he had no intention of following through with it. And actually, let me back up.
Going to do it. He was lying all along. He's been a conservative on economic issues for 50 straight years.
This part, I think, is a slight exaggeration, is where I think he fumbles it, because it might not be it's not as rhetorically efficacious to say that he's been a conservative for 50 years. He has been a neoliberal, like more of a centrist on economic issues, which is not only more accurate, I think it would be harder to refute. I think that's the key thing there. Although I would probably agree that Joe Biden has more in common with a conservative on economic issues than he would with a social democrat or a socialist, at least in the way he acts. Maybe not in the way that he describes himself or the way that he believes.
And I can go down a laundry list of things he was never going to do. Paid family leave, public option. He promised public option 1,000 times. Never once proposed it. Never once even talked about it.
Sure.
Because he was lying.
Okay, so this is, okay, I want to hone in on this. So firstly, I love everything you said at the beginning, okay? And I might repeat this line a lot. I feel like sometimes when I get people in front of me and we chat, their takes become very, very, very reasonable. But in going over like the videos for this conversation, the things I'm hearing, like in regards to the debt ceiling, I was like, there are no wins for Democrat, none, zero. Biden hates the middle class. Well, sure, the Democrats and the Republicans are on the same goddamn team. Democrats just give McCarthy gift after gift after gift after gift. Do you really think that like a Republican administration would more or less do the same thing as like a Democratic administration or a Democrat administration?
So with an asterisk, yes. So like,
this is where actually I think I might agree with Cenk on this, but I think even though Republicans are unequivocally worse than Democrats, I do think that Cenk is right to say that, like, ultimately they, you know, both the Democratic and Republican Party serve what he would call, he would say their donors, what socialists like myself would say, interests of private capital. They are both pro-capitalist parties. So a lot of times you will find bipartisan agreement on economic issues where anything that they pass, debt ceiling included, does not really benefit the workers, or is a detriment to workers, and is a benefit to like business owners and things like that.
For example, they did the IRS, funding the IRS $80 billion over 10 years. That was the one. And by the way, Steve, you can go back and watch our clips on Afghanistan, on the infrastructure bill, on all of these. I haven't changed my position 1%. So what I say on air at the Young Turks is what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the reason you might notice me being more vitriolic is because those are the videos that get more attention, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I also mean those 200%. So yes, the IRS bill was good, and that was a bill that the Republicans definitely would not have done. And I said, okay, look, give the Democratic Party credit there. There's a slight difference, even on economic issues, okay? So, okay. Now, having said that,
yeah, I think, so I agree with pretty much all of what Cenk said there. Definitely the expansion of the IRS was one of the best things that Joe Biden did. I would still view it as not enough because, I've come to expect that basically from politics. But yeah, Republicans basically just wanted to make it easier to dodge taxes if you're really wealthy. In fact, this has been a stated objective of theirs to downsize the IRS since the Reagan days. And the IRS has actually stated on several different occasions that the reason that it audits so many poor people is because that's easy and doesn't take a lot of money. And it doesn't audit rich people because that's harder and takes a lot more money. And they need the easy money because funding is a legitimate question mark for this federal institution that's in charge of administering taxes. So,
the rest of it has been a disaster. So the debt ceiling, there was one tiny thing we got, and God bless, okay, we got the exemption for homeless and veterans on SNAP, okay? But the other 8 things were all for Republicans. We got nothing back. We didn't need to do it at all. And I think, and this is the part that's probably gonna really bother you, I think that Biden wanted to do all those things. So when Obama was president, they invent this thing about, we're gonna now negotiate the debt ceiling. Okay, it's a Republican ploy, but Obama and Biden love going along with those ploys. They love it. They could easily just go 14th Amendment, I'm done with it. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to wreck the world economy, that is going to be 100% on you, okay? Well, instead when he gets into
I do think, I know Destiny is going to refute him in just a minute here. We'll see what he has to say. But I do agree that even when the Democratic Party at the federal level wants to do stuff, they tend to be very ineffectual. And I think it sucks. It really sucks. And I think it's a skill issue on the part of Joe Biden that he fell for the sort of Republican bait and switch that they always do. But, why am I leveling up? I should be going north. They'll promise we'll compromise with you on this, and this, and then they just end up not doing it because there's no consequence for lying. Basically, I think with a Democratic president in the White House and a Democratic-controlled Senate by a razor-thin margin, but still Democratic-controlled Senate, it is really, really the odds were basically 50% representation on the Democratic side to roughly 50% representation on the Republican side. Republicans controlled the House of Representatives. And Joe Biden only got 2 issues out of 10 to go his way on a debt ceiling bill, and didn't at all put the issue on Republicans hey, they were the ones holding up the economy. We said, here's our proposal, take it or leave it. We got to get the economy back going. I don't care. This is my final offer. You either pass this or you don't. He could have used some of the political authority that he had, or some of the authority, the sort of political leverage that he had, but he didn't. Yay, Charmander. I'll name you Owen. Yay. Okay. I'm gonna have to change its nature, but you know, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's see what Destiny has to say in
negotiation. It becomes 50% on him, and then in that negotiation, he gets almost nothing and gets slaughtered on everything else.
Okay, so let's hone in on this a little bit. Okay, so Biden has largely gotten to pass a lot of major legislation, right? We had the infrastructure bill, we had the American Rescue Plan, like huge ticket things, and our budget has been insanely huge. On our discretionary spending, we're talking like $1.5 trillion over and over and over again. With the debt ceiling approaching, and with the Republicans taking the House, I'm pretty sure every single political analyst thought the Democrats were going to have to give a lot when it came time to negotiate on the debt ceiling stuff. Now, Biden said he originally wasn't going to negotiate, but regardless of how we feel, like it's a Democratic president. If the United States defaulted on the debt, it would be catastrophic. Failures to negotiate the debt ceiling are always going to hurt the sitting president more than the Republican Party. We're not going to move it.
That is true. I will say that as well. While I think me and Cenk were thinking in the moment about like the actual logistical calculations of what Biden could have and maybe should have done to achieve the best outcome, like for everybody or whatever. There is also an optics game that's being played here where there's a non-zero chance that it doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, you've now become public enemy number one for everybody because you let the United States default on its debt. Although even then, I think I would bring to the table, if I were in this argument, I think I would bring up that the United States realistically was never going to default on its debt. The entire world economy depends on the United States. We are a global debtor. We owe so many people so many money that nobody would let us default on our debt, even if we said, haha, we're going to do this. And if they did, it would just be downright catastrophic for the whole world. Great Depression times 10 and all that. And I think Republicans and Democrats alike both know this. And I think that neither of them were going to actually let that happen. They just wanted to get what they wanted to get out of it. Ultimately, it came down to the Republicans actually wanted what they wanted, and the Democrats sort of viewed it as a matter of like procedure and whatever. You know, one of the critiques I have of the Democratic Party is that they're not very ideological. This is one thing that the Republican Party beats out the Democrats on every time, is impassioned pleas to the public. The Democrats are very bad at this because them being largely made of neoliberals, they view most politics as a purely technocratic and apolitical endeavor, which is very bizarre to somebody like me anyways. You know, they believe that it's purely a matter of competence, how you manage certain issues on whatever. Let's see, which one is... Oh, I actually got it right first try. Nice. All right, let's redistribute some EVs here. Very nice. Okay. Export save. Try this again, and great. Good. Resuming the game, resuming the debate.
To blame House Republicans when Democrats have the Senate and the presidency. I feel like when we look at everything that was given.
Oh yeah, he is true. He is true. He is correct as well that like what I mentioned about the Democrats controlling the Senate and the presidency, that goes both ways. Which means if you fuck up, then they're gonna say, hey, it's your fault.
And I guess this is my problem when I listen to you guys talk about this, is I hear this like Republicans got everything they want. We just gave and gave and gave and gave. The difference between the House bill that McCarthy passed versus what was finally signed in the Senate, I felt like it was some of the, and I see everybody else say this. Krugman was saying this, the guys at Pod Save America was saying this, even Ben Shapiro was admitting this, that the political maneuvering was pretty good. That like some of the stuff that was given up wasn't really a give up at all. So for instance, a lot of people complain about work requirements on SNAP.
Oh, you might have a point
so
here.
work requirements were increased from 49 years of age to 54 years of age. But because of the wide exemption that was given for veterans and homeless people, I think the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, their guesstimate was that the outlays from that program are actually going to increase. We're going to spend more money on that program than we were before. Because if you look at the unemployment in that age bracket, it's like 2.5%. Like most people are working in this age bracket. It's not like they're having trouble finding jobs or anything. And there's a lot of exemptions made for like people in people with children, people from orphanages, people with mental illness. There's a lot of exemptions made for that. That's like one example. And there's like example after example after example of like the gives that we made were just not a big deal. And a lot of the important stuff like Social Security, Medicaid, repeals of the student loan debt, none of this got through on the Republican side. So when I see that like the things that we did give were things that were either coming anyway. So for instance, like the student aid, the interest on the student loan starting to, I guess, tick back again and repayment starting again at the end of summer. This was already going to happen, and we gave that. We didn't really lose anything.
Oh yeah, that's an unfortunate reality of things. I guess this is kind of learning for me because I wasn't too filled in on the particulars of like specifically what policies the Democrats like gave ground on. So if that's one of them, but then like he was talking about the work requirements for SNAP being expanded from 49 to 54, even with the spending increase and the exemptions for homeless people and veterans. That still seems pretty bad, right? Like there's still, even outside of that group, there's a lot of people that are underemployed in the U.S. Who aren't veterans and aren't homeless necessarily. Maybe they live in like an apartment where they're woefully behind on rent or something. There's still a lot of people that would be directly negatively impacted by that albeit somewhat small erosion of SNAP benefits. So I think, I don't know. I guess I don't want him to undersell this too much. I think he's underselling it a little bit too much because it's still pretty bad for people who benefit from that.
You look at like
people who need
stuff.
It as well.
You look at the IRS. We fought for $80 billion in increased funding. We gave $20 billion back for now. I feel like that was a major win for Biden in that we moved past the debt ceiling thing for 2 years. The 2-year thing bothered you guys. The House bill was worlds apart. They wanted a 10-year cap on spending, and we got that down to 2. And then the budgets that we got was like.
Oh yeah, 10-year cap on spending would have been fucking horrific. The 10-year cap on spending literally would have made things worse. It would have made it so that the next debt ceiling debacle is even worse than this one. And make no mistake, there will be a next one because Republicans always do that shit.
Like $700 billion versus the $550 they were asking for in the House for 2024 fiscal year 2025. That all of this seems like pretty decent stuff. Again, I understand that we didn't like fight for anything, we didn't get anything, but considering it was a House majority for Republicans and considering people thought we were going to lose a lot more, I don't understand why there's not just like a little bit to be happy about there.
No, zero. Okay.
Nah, I think Cenk is a little bit too hardline on this. It's definitely the case that like even if this is clearly not ideal and this is not what I would have liked to happen or anything, and this isn't even the best outcome I think that could have been achieved by a long shot, considering that actually no, if it was a House negotiation maybe it would have been close. I don't know. Either way, I think that the Democrats are by no means exempt from criticism on this issue, where they had more leverage to use and seemed like they didn't use it, either because they were like so short-sighted, byproduct of like sheer necessity of like, shit, we have to get this passed otherwise the country's fucked, or just because they weren't especially committed to using this as an opportunity to get some of their agenda passed to actually strengthen the economy in the future. A little bit of a tangent in coming here, but some of the investments that the Democrats didn't make that maybe they should be. Like there's some stuff that's politically very efficacious to push for because it pays for itself. SNAP is one of those things, right? And that's why I think that's another part of why I think it's so bad that SNAP got eroded even a little bit, is because there are certain economic programs where like it doesn't it like almost doesn't matter that you're spending money on it as long as you're like providing the necessities that people need, right? SNAP is woefully not enough, but it is something. And if we invest more in it to expand it, make it so that if you are unemployed or don't have a source of income, you can still get food guaranteed, like decent food, that pays for itself down the line. Because there are a lot of downstream effects of having a poor diet or a problem with like malnutrition and like gradual starvation that, you know, severely detriment your ability to live and, crass though it sounds, be productive in the economy, you know? Anyways.
Okay, so let me explain.
Okay.
So, look, brother.
But to be clear, I really don't agree that there's nothing to take away from as like a positive in this bill. I think it's clearly better than nothing.
When you say political analysts expected that it would be worse, well, first of all, that's corporate media, and corporate media always thinks the country is center right. That the Republicans are right on the debt and deficit. I mean, they're clowns. Trump drove up the deficit by the debt by $7.8 trillion. Reagan, Bush, they all drive up deficits. Last Republican president to balance the budget was Dwight Eisenhower. Okay, but what does corporate media always tell you? Oh, the Republicans care about the debt. They care about the deficit. It's a lie. Lie. Okay, so when they say, oh, okay. Oh, but Biden has to give everything to the Republicans. He didn't give them everything. He gave them only 89%. Oh, what a champion. Well, yeah, corporate politicians are happy. Corporate Democrats are happy. Corporate Republicans are happy. Corporate media is happy. So that's not an argument at all, in my opinion. Okay.
Now, Cenk is not making this argument very effectively, but I do think there is something to be said about the bias that he's bringing up among the like political consultant class. It is true that a lot of the political consultants are much older than the demographic of people that would be affected by these programs and whatever. And like, you know, basically they're considerably older and out of touch on, more out of touch on average than the general population. And it is also the case that they have a very like institutionalist corporatist bias. And without a doubt, that does play into the, like, you know, the decision-making. Well, the decision-making and also the analysis that they put forward, where they are going to be biased towards, like, the status quo of I don't know, business speak, you might say. I don't, like, look, I don't think Cenk is totally wrong on that. It's just a matter of, like, it's a matter of him, I think, not phrasing it super well. It doesn't have a whole lot behind it from what he said, but it is the case that they'll sort of misrepresent the issue. I've read a lot of news stories from, like, established legacy media sources that will sort of that will very, very overtly show when they're trying to hide, like, an anti-worker bias. You know, that's definitely a thing that happens. I'll see what Destiny has to say on this.
Okay, so you have to look at the actual policy.
I guess, okay. I think the strongest version of Cenk's argument, the one that I'll agree with probably the most, is that it is true that I think that the political analysts and like consultant class did for sure misrepresent the issue that this would be a loss on all fronts for Democrats, right? And then celebrated when it was not a loss on all fronts, even though the initial it was only a celebration for them because of the initial, like, the starting premise that Democrats would give in on every issue. And I think a lot of them were saying that prescriptively, that, like, they should basically compromise with Republicans on every issue to raise the debt ceiling. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think they should do that. And then the fact that they didn't is just, like, a step up from the worst possible outcome, or like the You know what I mean? It's just a step up from zero.
So what actually happened there? Well, are you right that the Republicans threatened to punch us in the face about 100 times? Yes. So, but when we get punched in the face 80 times, and then we get one thing back, that's the one that I mentioned on Snap, that's not a win. You got punched in the face 80 times.
I think okay, he needs to back this up with like examples. I would want to know what policies are being mentioned here that the Democrats have compromised on. I think Snap was actually one of them. But like, yeah, I think this is actually a stronger version of that argument, that like,
need it at all.
You know, getting punched in the face 80 times is not a win. It's only marginally less bad than getting punched in the face 100 times.
The 14th Amendment is crystal clear. It says our debt shall not be questioned. It's one of the clearest amendments there is. The only reason you even entered the negotiations is if you want to give things away. And so I'll give you two of the specific examples that you mentioned, okay? So for example, on work requirements, and corporate media always moves the goalpost, okay? On work requirements, first they came and there's, oh, the Democrats said no way. And corporate media says, Democrats say no way, they're gonna stand strong. Hakeem Jeffries puts out a strong statement, oh, we will not bend on that. And then when they collapse, complete utter collapse, right? And then again, God bless, at least we got the veterans and the homeless, okay? But they collapsed on the work requirements that they said they would not budge on. Then corporate media goes, what a wonderful bipartisan compromise. It's a good thing we have work requirements. Wait, what the hell happened? Okay, I covered when you said X. Now I'm covering when you say Y, and those things are not at all the same. On student debt, classic trick. So what did he give? He gave the Republicans ending the moratorium.
Okay, I need to pause. He's actually made a couple of statements I think that I want to talk about. Yeah, that's I guess that's one of the examples of the sort of dishonest shit that you sometimes see in like legacy news media that you could really benefit from media literacy on, and that you might need media literacy for, is that like oftentimes they will like shift the goalposts on stuff like that. Let's see here. Actually, I need to go back. I didn't.
We have work requirements. Okay, or collapse, right?
Okay, yeah. So he was work requirements was one of the things that they were talking about. Yeah. Again, Cenk is very animated, and I think sometimes that's to his detriment when he's making arguments like this. You can see. I don't know if you can see Destiny's chat down here, but they are very much like. Very much not in agreement with Cenk on this one, because I mean he's a populist and they're not. Do I have an antidote? I had better. I have a full restore. Fuck it. All right.
And then again, God bless, at least we got the veterans and the homeless, okay? But
oh yeah, and also he mentioned about the 14th Amendment. It does say that clear as day. It's like it's very weird to me. It's very weird from a perspective of the Democrats wanting to win. It's weird that they never picked the strongest and easiest available option. You know, it's like they just don't know how to utilize game theory. This is something that I was kind of annoyed by in political science when we had to learn about game theory, because it seems so abstract and whatever. But the one thing that I remember taking away actually was not from political science. I heard about this elsewhere. Is that like if you have an ultimate strategy, if there is an ultimate method to overcoming an obstacle, you're always going to use that as a general rule. Like predictive, people will use the strongest and easiest available tool to overcome obstacles. And here we have probably the strongest and most easy and most available provision of the 14th Amendment. The legitimacy of the US debt shall not be questioned. Basically, we're good for it categorically, you know. Basically making it unconstitutional to default on the debt. And that's a very clear, very easy piece of political leverage that I think Biden could use here. Or could have used, or, you know, something like that. But they sort of left it untouched. Same thing with college debt relief and the Higher Education Act. There is a part of the Higher Education Act that just says that the U.S. government has the authority to pause, put lien on, or just forgive loans and forgive debt. You know, that's just a thing that the government is allowed to do if it wants to. And it is, from a perspective of the Democrats wanting to win that badly, at least, it's very weird that they didn't go for that right away. Of course, the premise there, I think, is the thing that needs to be challenged. The Democrats don't really want to win. See, you know, obviously the political parties, they do a lot of fundraising. So I think the real objective there was to not say to like sort of half commit, right, by invoking the HEROES Act, which was a much weaker argument, even though it still should have worked. Invoke the HEROES argument, knowing that it's going to be defeated, and then run on the promise of invoking the Higher Education Act, which is a stronger option to do the same thing in the next election. It's a fundraising tool. And then inevitably not do that. Except in this case, I will give Biden credit that he has said, like, okay, now we're actually pursuing this again under the Higher Education Act this time to get student loans forgiven. And I think if it were, in this case, if it were purely a campaign trick, then they would have waited till 2024 to say that. But they're saying it now. So, but on the issue of what was Cenk talking about? He was talking about work requirements or something like that. With regards to the debt ceiling and the 14th Amendment, I think that is the case, that they just wanted that as a sort of political prop to use in later elections and didn't care all that much, or didn't feel any pressing need to actually get some sort of political gain out of the debt ceiling negotiations, which are all for show anyways. It should be noted.
They collapsed on the work requirements that they said they would not budge on. Then corporate media goes, what a wonderful bipartisan compromise. It's a good thing we have work requirements. Wait, what the hell happened? Okay, I covered when you said X. Now I'm covering when you say Y. And those things are not at all the same. On student debt, classic trick. So what did he give? He gave the Republicans ending the moratorium in September. So you're gonna have to start paying interest again on your loans. Okay, but they said, all right, but we're not gonna take away the student debt forgiveness. He knows the Supreme Court's gonna strike that down in 2 weeks. Biden knows that. So that way he gets to give away the store and then go, the favorite thing of corporate Democrats. There was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do. Oh, the Supreme Court, golly gee.
Now, okay. So Cenk, again, not the most effective way to make this argument, but I think if he's saying in regards to this attempt to cancel student debt as opposed to the last one, let me see.
The favorite thing of forgiveness, interest again on your loans. Republicans ending the moratorium in September, so you're gonna have to start paying interest again on your loans. Okay, but they said, all right, but we're not gonna take away the student debt forgiveness. He knows the Supreme Court's gonna strike that down in 2 weeks. Biden knows that. So that way he gets to give away the store. And
oh, this was before it happened the first time. So yeah, Cenk actually, his prediction was wrong on this. Joe Biden actually decided, like, no, we're gonna commit to this a little bit harder. Although I think the reason that he's committing to it this time, committing to student debt relief, is because there is going to be a debt crisis if he doesn't, and it's gonna immediately get much worse, because as Cenk and Destiny have both talked about, the moratorium on student loans repayments expiring is going to mean people are going to start having to pay interest again, and so that's going to put a dent in a lot of people's pockets, people who are potentially pretty vulnerable. And additionally, there's going to be $10,000 to $20,000 of student debt that the government promised debtors they would not have to pay back, that now they are going to have to pay back. So there's going to be, to some degree, an artificial shock, but we're going to be in just as shitty a place as we were before the pandemic started, because all of the student loan relief was ultimately temporary, such as the critique I have of a lot of things that Joe Biden, of the Joe Biden administration, is that, like, you know, especially with the student loan repayment pause, he should have just done debt forgiveness from the outset. But the repayment pause, you know, while it's good for a lot of people to, you know, not have to worry about that expense for however many months, for several months, and interest wasn't allowed to accrue, so good on that. They do still eventually have to pay that same amount of money, just they get a little bit more time. to come up with it.
The favorite thing of corporate Democrats.
So he does the whole
thing we could do. There was not favorite thing.
With progressives.
I don't know why
I think we have to stop relying on these like Hail Mary legal arguments that we think or hope are going to bail us out of having to do any sort of legislative compromise. The idea that the 14th Amendment is crystal clear, that we both know that is absolutely not true. One of us might think that, and some people might think that, but that is a hotly contested thing. Not only is it hotly contested, it would be so contested that if we were to go that 14th Amendment route, there was a chance that the legal challenges would extend that past the expiration date of our debt. And if we default on our debt while we're trying to play complicated legal battles on whether or not the 14th Amendment allows us to just pay the debt with absolutely no negotiation with Congress required, that could potentially be like, I don't think I need to explain how disastrous it would be for the United States to default on its debt.
Yeah, okay, so I hadn't considered that. I guess there's a sort of time dissonance here. Yeah, it's possible that procedurally invoking the 14th Amendment wouldn't have worked. I think Destiny does have a point, because he's arguing procedurally here. He might agree that, like, in fact, he probably agrees that, like, you know, debt ceiling should have been increased so the U.S. doesn't default. You know, all indication as to that. But like with regards to the method by which you do that, yeah, the 14th Amendment could have been kind of dangerous. Although I think if you're really feeling to be in Joker mode any day of the week, then you could have put it in front of the Supreme Court anyway and be like, hey, do you guys want to be the 9 justices that saw the U.S. default on its debt while we tried to actually fix some shit? I guess what I'm trying to get at is that credit to Cenk saying that is a thing that we could have and maybe should have tried, but also credit to Destiny for saying that, like, there's no guarantee that that would work and maybe it's better that we didn't try it. Actually, I can't. Wait a minute. No, I can't have that both ways. I think I agree more with Destiny than Cenk on this one. Yeah, I've kind of changed my view on like proceduralist arguments like this one, because morally I don't think there's any ambiguity that like student loan debt should be repaid if it can be, and like, or like should be forgiven if it can be, given the debt crisis that we're in, and obviously in this case it would be disastrous for the U.S. to default on its debt. I don't know. I'll have to. I might have to revisit the issue. This is the consequence of having politics that moves so fast that, like, just a month out now I'm forgetting a lot of the particulars. But I do get the sense that Destiny is a little bit too optimistic about some of the provisions that got passed through by the Republicans as a result of the debt ceiling increasing.
While we play this political football back and forth with the debt. So I don't buy that the 14th Amendment was such an
easy
way
it is
out,
political
number
football.
one. Number two, as much as we hate it, well, I don't hate it. I mean, it's part of how our system works. Bipartisan is not the enemy. Bipartisan is not evil. If you don't have majorities or supermajorities in both of your houses, bipartisan is the way that you have to go. You know, even you mentioned that $15 an hour minimum wage hike earlier. That $15 an hour minimum wage thing in the Senate, that was opposed by 8 Democrats. And that's when you're only winning by a vice president tiebreaker vote. Like, there's no way that you can get through anything that is going to help the American people if you're not looking to be bipartisan in some way. You brought up the moratorium on student debt. That moratorium was expiring anyway. Student debt was always going to be the interest payments were always coming back to the table at the end of summer. That was a freebie, a literal freebie. Republicans got nothing there. And then when you talk about the Supreme Court striking down student debt forgiveness, that's the $10,000 to $20,000 that Biden is trying to strike down. But the $42 billion that he's already forgiven for a lot of public workers, people working in healthcare, people that have like employment jobs by the federal government, that $42 billion that has been forgiven for young people, that's done. That's a done deal. Republicans didn't claw any of it back. The Supreme Court can't take any of that back. The only thing that...
Oh, did he? I think... Yeah, hold on. Let me actually look up, see what Destiny is talking about here. Let's see. Joe Biden, public worker debt forgiveness? Oh, yeah, here, hold on. Oh, yeah, okay. Nearly 610,000 public sector workers got student loan forgiveness after Biden loosened the rules. Have received debt relief from the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program since October 2021. when they temporarily expanded eligibility. Oh, great. Another one of those temporary things. This is another example of, I think, Destiny, in this case, overselling the degree to which this was, like, a great accomplishment. They're good things. Don't get me wrong. These are good things. I would not be caught dead disagreeing that that's good. But I think it's a little bit smaller than the current issue. Because the $10,000 to $20,000 of student debt that could be forgiven here applies to literally tens of millions of Americans. Whereas that was only 610,000, right? I think it was something like 26 million Americans applied for the student debt forgiveness, right? Before it was struck down by the Supreme Court. 26 million people applied, and I think like 16 million people were found to be eligible. So like that's 16 million people who would have had $10,000 to $20,000 of debt forgiven, but haven't. And I think where I'll actually disagree with both of these guys, I disagree with Destiny that like Biden has already done enough on this issue. I don't know if he believes that. I'm sure if I ask him, he would probably, maybe he would say that we should keep pursuing this. But I will disagree with Cenk that like Biden has given up, because at this stage I don't think that he can. I think Joe Biden has to keep pursuing this because there's so much money and so many people on the line that optically it looks fucking horrible if he doesn't.
They're fighting over now, and the Supreme Court is going to be that $10,000 to $20,000 forgiveness per person afterwards. Again, I agree that like there are some things that like the $20 billion. I like the IRS, okay, clawing back, and it's the only fucking organization in the government that actually makes money, okay. So that's the dumbest thing to take away money from. But that's only true. Losing $20 billion out of the $80 billion that we funded for it, that's probably the biggest punch in the face that I can see. And then maybe the spending caps. But man, originally McCarthy wanted all 80 billion back. Originally McCarthy wanted those caps at $540 billion.
Oh yeah, the Republican proposal was pretty fucking insane for the debt ceiling, and what they went with was no doubt better than that. But I think even the critique to be had of the Democratic Party here that I don't know if they're going to mention was that the Democratic plan. So like how this negotiation worked, right? Is the Republicans came to the table with their abysmal plan, and the Democrats came to the table with their plan. The Democrats' plan, their ideal version of what they wanted, was still, I think, not enough. And that could just be the ideological difference between me, a socialist, and the Democrats, mostly liberals. But I think we could have actually gotten something better if the Democratic offer was initially a lot more demanding of like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, right? And sort of the compromise is worse by way of the Democrats not having demanded more initially when they first came to the table with their offers, and then say, okay, let's discuss.
We got that up to $711 billion. There were some punches, but I don't think it was like 89% punches in the face. I think it was like 15% punches in the face.
Okay, so let me address those one by one. I'm going to read you.
I guess that's fair to say.
The 14th Amendment.
Like if we're just saying between what the Democrats proposed and like what we eventually got, that might be true.
I'm in here. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. Okay. So you called it a Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. If that's not clear enough, then words have no meaning. Okay. So, and not only that, Stephen, first of all, you don't have to do anything. You just simply keep doing what you're doing. Let the Republicans, and say you're using the 14th Amendment, our debt shall not be questioned. The Republicans go to court, okay? If they want to, go ahead, go for it. Try to destroy the 14th Amendment, try to destroy the economy. Now you 100% own it because you went to court to try to destroy the economy, okay? You go to court, that puts the conservative Supreme Court in a very tough position, okay? Because they either have to...
That's true. I think I'm going to let Cenk finish. I think I want to, I'll see where this goes, but I do want to agree with Cenk on this one. I think that it could very well have put the Republicans really on the back foot. It would have made them look so bad if they went to court to challenge the ability of the Democrats to raise the debt ceiling and prevent the U.S. from going bankrupt or something, or defaulting on its debt.
say, okay, the Democrats are obviously right, plain reading of the language, the original meaning, everything, every conservative legal principle they have ever said. Or they have to say, okay, we're just partisan hacks, which I grant you that they might, and we don't care anything that we ever said before, but now we're burning our original meaning and plain reading of the text.
This is, I think, the weakest way to make this argument. He's loading this so much more than it needs to be. I don't think you need to sell anybody really on the idea that the Supreme Court are partisan hacks. It kind of works just as an underlying assumption. At this point, with six justices being conservative, I think it would be enough just to say that, like, or the Supreme Court could say, no, you can't do this. The U.S. will now, like, default on its debt or whatever. But even with all that, I think Destiny might still have a point with the whole, like, that might take too long. Actually, no, wait. I think I agree with Cenk on this, because if the Biden administration decides we're going to invoke the 14th Amendment, right? That then puts the Republicans in the position they would have to then challenge that actively, which means that the assumption is if the Republicans don't challenge it, he can just do it, right? Or, like, if somebody doesn't challenge it, he can just use the 14th Amendment to increase the debt ceiling, and then they would actively have to stop that from going through. So I kind of disagree with Destiny now, I guess, that, like, it would have taken too long, because it would have been the Republicans making it take too long. And, like, I think the Republicans, like I said earlier, Republicans and Democrats both know that, like, it might actually be the economic end of the world if you let the U.S. default on its debt. So you can get away with some pretty drastic stuff. As the Republicans showed, they brought that, like, horrendous proposal to the table, and to a certain degree forced the Democrats to take them seriously.
Are two of the pillars of conservative legal principles. We're burning it to the ground because this is super clear, and we're just going to lie about it. Okay. So that is not a Hail Mary. We have a massively winning case, and in fact, we win either direction there. And if you care just about politics and the Republicans own destroying the economy, that's a disaster for them. Now, I care that we don't actually destroy the economy, right? And of course, defaulting on the debt is a terrible thing. But Stephen, this is another core disagreement, I think, because I think the politicians are completely controlled by their donors. And I think every piece of legislation shows that. So the Republicans were never actually going to default because their donors would have been livid. Their donors are the richest people in the country. They need that stock market healthy and vibrant. They would have cut those guys' throats if they had actually defaulted on debt ceiling. The trick is we pretend we're going to cut it.
Now, okay, chat's, I think, rightly erupting at Cenk when he's attributing this to this conspiratorial notion of politicians being controlled by their donors. I think I would have phrased it more that, like, politicians obviously have a vested interest in the health and strength of the economy, right? And so I think both the Democrats and Republicans understand the implications of letting the U.S. economy completely fail. And so on that grounds, I would make then similar versions of this argument that, like, obviously the Republicans know that it would be the end of their collective careers as a party if they let the U.S. default on its debt. Like, that was never really an option.
Yeah, those are the bad cops, and then the good cops come in.
I need to go to the power plant.
Oh, God, gee, I wish there was something that we could do, but there's nothing we could do. Hey, our donors are happy too. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, what a win for everyone. And two policy things.
I think the conspiratorial phrasing here is really what hurts Cenk in making this argument. I would agree that, like, the interests of private capital control politics for the most part, like the manufactured consent and all that. But I think it's more important to just first set the bedrock of, like, both parties know what happens if the debt ceiling is not raised and if the U.S. defaults. And obviously neither party wants to do that, so they're not going to do that. Both of them know it. And so, like, Republicans aren't going to commit political suicide on that basis because, like, the business interests that they represent, for the most part, would be livid. Their voters would be livid. They might be able to sell it to some of them, but let's be real, most people would be livid, and like it would basically be, they would be remembered as the party that ended the world, or like plunged us into post-apocalyptic
when you talk about
economics.
The IRS, we both agreed that that was a good bill that the Democrats passed. Now they're giving back a quarter of it to 20%, to 20 billion. Why doesn't Biden ever fight back rhetorically? Why doesn't he say, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were reducing the deficit. Taking away $20 billion from the IRS actually increases the deficit by approximately $120 billion. Because every nonpartisan organization that's looked at it says $1 spent at the IRS brings you $6 back in revenue for the government. So why doesn't he do a press conference go, my Republican friends, and he loves them, he's always calls them his Republican friends.
I think this is a pretty strong argument from Cenk. This would be a very easy thing for Biden to argue in front of like the press, like in the conference room and whatever. And it harkens back to what I was saying with certain government offices and programs and, well, like objects of investment paying for themselves. Education is one of those. Food is one of those. So is the IRS. There's a lot of rich people out there dodging taxes. And, you know, when you give the IRS more money, that's that much more money they can use to make sure that rich people aren't cheating their taxes. So, yeah, I think that is definitely something Biden could and definitely should have done. There's so little that I could see in the way of negative consequences for him going out and being like, nah, you guys can't take that money from the IRS. That's literally hurting the economy.
My Republican friends, I thought they cared about the debt. It turns out they want to destroy the debt in order to protect the rich. Because this is targeted at people making over $400,000, and they want to pile on debt just to protect the rich. I won't have it. I'm going to fight for you. And he never does that because he doesn't believe that. And then last thing on this.
Joe Biden would never sound that populist in doing that. But I do think that, like, you know, again, something that he could have and should have done, you know, is sort of emphasize that point.
Is pay-go on the executive side. We've talked about like 8 different things to give away. One of them is pay-go. And that means that if you do any executive action, I mean, they weren't going to pass any bills anyway, but if you do any executive action, the only thing he's got left for the next 2 years, now you have to take away something if you're ever going to spend money on anything. But that basically neuters the White House.
Oh yeah, this is easily, I think I'm remembering now, this is easily the worst concession that the Democrats made, and this, like, they deserve to get lampooned for this in like by their political strategists. Obviously, you know, I would limit the degree to which you do that in like campaign ads and whatever, or something like that. There's a strategic argument to be made that like Democrats need to win the next election because they're better than Republicans. Republicans want to kill us all. Only slightly hyperbolizing there. But yeah, the fact that Democrats said like, okay, yeah, whatever, any spending increase has to be at the expense of another program, like that's pretty inexcusable.
The executive branch. Well, now, why did Biden throw that in? Because he wants to be neutered. That takes the pressure off. Then I could just run for president, only care about myself. I wasn't going to do anything in the next 2 years anyway. And it's nice and convenient for him. So Biden wins, the Republicans win, corporate media wins, we all get screwed.
Okay, so something we're going to center around this is like Biden wants this and the Democrats.
I don't think Biden specifically wants that, but it is very convenient. I will say that it is very convenient. I would bet money that there is somebody in like the strategic, like, I don't know, strategic planning, whatever, at the Democratic Party who's thinking this. They're like, oh, this would be great as a fundraising opportunity and whatever. But you know, it is undoubtedly the effect that the Democrats will willingly take a loss as a function of like, we can make money off of this to fundraise for the next election, and then it like leads to, whether they intend to or not, it leads to them promising things, not delivering, running on it, repeatedly not delivering. You get the idea.
Want this. I guess running through a couple of these, amendments are never as clear as like the words have crystal clear meaning, right?
Although I would say, like, if I were making the argument, that's the version I would make, is regardless of intentionality. But I do believe that there is some intentionality behind it. I don't think that's the crux of the argument, though. You know, as neoliberals, I think that they're very interested in, like, I mean, obviously, as a matter of optics, you know, they're interested in signaling that they're better than Republicans, which is not a high bar to clear. But, you know, neoliberals, because this is a neoliberal country, and it mostly looks like what neoliberals would want it to look like, they are invested in not changing stuff. So if they can get elected while promising to change things that they don't actually want to change, it's a pretty solid strategy. And it also relates to the rotating villain strategy, where there's like the Democratic Party doesn't actually want to pass something, but they know it would be optically terrible if all of them voted against it. So they get like 1 or 2 senators, or a few House people, a few representatives who like aren't that popular anyway to vote against it. So people mostly direct their ire towards them and not the party at large. This is what Cenk is referring to here. It's actually, I think, a well-known political strategy, the rotating villain strategy.
Like, how many times have we fought over the wording of the Second Amendment? The right to bear arms shall not be infringed.
That one's true.
What does it mean to have a well-regulated militia? What do the commas mean? How many times have we seen videos of, like, sovereign citizens?
That's true. What do the commas mean?
Like, the idea, like, well, the words are crystal clear, especially after we've just gotten out of a very, very, very complicated battle relating to Roe v. Wade and whether or not substantive due process or implied rights are even a real thing. I think it's very cautious, or I think we should proceed with caution when we say something like, oh yeah, like the wording on this particular part of the Constitution is very clear, therefore we have no debt ceiling anymore, especially when we're doing such a massive divergence of what's already kind of been set as like a political norm. Not to say that that battle can't be won, but like if on one end we've got, okay, well, we can negotiate a little bit with the Republicans, they won the House anyway, and for the most part we don't take too many big hits, or on the other hand, we could gamble with the future of the world, but we maybe are going to win. That just seems like such a clear-cut alternative. Like, probably just go with a negotiated position rather than, 1, hoping that we win in court, or 2, hoping that if we lose in court, the sitting president isn't blamed and the Republicans get blamed, which I don't even know if that helps us anyway, because it's not like the composition of the Supreme Court is going to change. And now all we've got is a country that can blame the Republicans for the fact that we've destroyed the world economy. It reminds me of the, there's like I think it's like 5 people are sitting in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and they're like, man, we destroyed the whole world, but we sure did create some good short-term value for our shareholders for a brief period of time or whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's the kind of battle we want to be getting into. I mean, I understand the arguments for it, but man, in terms of like, why doesn't Biden fight back? This gets into kind of like, oh, well, you know, political theory and what are people doing? Right. But like my interpretation of it, and I think quite a few people have had this interpretation, is that this was such an astoundingly good deal for Democrats, considering how bad it could have gone, that it's better to just shut up and let McCarthy and McConnell go out and say, oh, well, we're very proud to vote for this, and let them have their win, where we're not really giving much at all, so that McCarthy's position in the House isn't threatened, and so that Republicans aren't in an uproar, that they weren't able to attack any of the entitlement programs, any of our big non-discretionary spending stuff, like they've really wanted to do. Republicans have been gunning for things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Republicans have been bloodthirsty to get rid of all of the student loan forgiveness, to claw that back completely. Republicans have been hungry to make huge cuts in the Inflation Reduction Act. They wanted to get rid of all the tax credits, all those green energy tax credits. McCarthy in the House bill got rid of every single thing. And again, the things that we gave were not that significant. You mentioned PAYGO, for instance. First of all, in October of 2019, Trump already had enacted PAYGO for the executive branch via executive order. Number 1. And number 2, the PAYGO that was enacted, 1, it sunsets at the end of 2024, so it's not that big of a deal. And 2, the most important part. What? He might not do anything anyway. But regardless, number 2, the PAYGO requirements for the executive branch are exempt from judicial review. Line 17, 18, 19, no determination, finding, action, or omission under this title shall be subject to judicial review. So basically, Biden can say, listen, I'm doing this on EL because I have good reasons, trust me, and it's not like anybody can review it anyway. So again, I feel like this is one of those things where it's like, we gave it, and then some people, like you guys are the Young Turks, and other people are like, oh my God, this is a horrible thing the Democrats gave. But I think the reason why Biden and the Democrats are being quite honest is like, okay, listen, yeah, guys, the Republicans sure did win here, but at the end of the day, really all we lost was like the $20 billion over the next 3 years, I guess, for the IRS. And for the most part, I don't think anything else really mattered that much. And then you can respond to any of that if you want. And then it's just like kind of my broader thing. You keep saying this thing where it's like Biden wants to do nothing. The Democrats don't want to do anything. All their corporate donors own them. Do we really feel that way? I think you can respond to anything you want. Yeah, go for it.
You know, I actually expected Destiny to put up a stronger argument against the donor thing. But yeah, I think he's correct. on most of the stuff about like it not being terrible. Like, God, there was a lot there. I would have to go back and sort of zero in on some stuff, but I wanted to let him finish. Is the thing. He was talking for a while.
McCarthy's position in the House isn't threatened, and so the Republicans aren't in an uproar that they weren't able to attack any of the entitlement.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, so his argument being that, like, you know, it was a tactical L. Like, basically, this had the function of like pacifying the Republicans, so they're not too pissed and like don't get too hungry for another thing in the future. They're like kind of satisfied and a little bit less active. I could see that, yeah.
Reduction Act. They wanted to get rid of all the tax credits, all those green energy tax credits. McCarthy in the House bill got rid of every single thing. And again, the things that we gave were not that significant. You mentioned PAYGO, for instance. First of all, in October of 2019, Trump already had enacted PAYGO for the executive branch via executive order. Number one. And number two,
taking hostage. A good thing that we passed. For God's sake, get it to the average American. So we gave away 30 billion there, 20 billion to the IRS, on and it goes. But Stephen, the larger point is, if you allow the Republicans to keep taking hostages, they will take hostages to the end of time. So someone has to be strong enough, like LBJ on economic issues, FDR, and say, hey, I'm drawing the line, okay? If you don't ever draw the line, every time the Republicans are in office, like Trump, they never talk about the debt ceiling. In fact, we talked about it today on the Young Turks. Steve Bannon was there the first time they raised the debt ceiling under Trump. Now he's like, oh, all the Republicans should be primaried if they voted for this thing. What are you guys talking about? You passed it without a single word, right? So why not pound them on that? Why not say Steve Bannon did it, Donald Trump did it, etc.? Why?
That's true. Here, hold on. Let me rewind to zoom. Like,
without Young Turks. Steve Bannon was there the first time they raised on and it goes. Get it to the average American. So we gave away 30 billion there, 20. If you allow to the IRS, on and it goes. But Stephen, the larger point is, if you allow the Republicans to keep taking hostages, they will take hostages to the end of time.
Yeah, Republicans. Okay, this is where a big part where I will absolutely agree with Cenk is that the Democratic Party isn't nearly aggressive enough when the Republican Party decides to do this thing where they take politically take the country hostage or whatever, right? Because like you could so easily point out like, hey guys, by the way, Republicans did this shit, but they don't do it. The Democrats don't usually do that, and like they just never. It seems like they just never fight hard enough on any given thing because they like don't view it as a issue there where they like need to or whatever. It's very weird that the Democrats never seem to fight that much on anything. Like the Republicans walk in and like, we've got a gun or something, and then the Democrats are like, oh, watch out, he's got a gun, and they just all put their hands up. Never mind whether the gun's actually loaded or not. This is a weird analogy, but you know, when the Republicans declare their intention to wreak havoc, the response from the Democratic Party sometimes is just, well, I guess we'll lose then, or something like that. It's like, I guess we'll just compromise instantly, or something. It's like, no. You kind of have to fight fire with fire in some of these situations in order to avert a like policymaking disaster, or like policymaking backslide, I should say.
So someone has to be strong enough, like LBJ on economic issues, FDR.
Yeah, there we go. So like, basically, the Democrats now are not, well, they're not the more progressive Democrats, economically speaking, of the 20th century. And clearly, there was something to be had there where like Democrats would actually fight on economic issues. Granted, FDR was a little bit in a different circumstance where the Great Depression had just happened, and I don't think any Republican in their right mind would fight him on that, or any politician even. But, you know, Lyndon Johnson with Great Society and all that. War on poverty and stuff. Basically, you have to, as the Democrats, if you're actually serious about getting your agenda passed, you really have to be committed to putting the Republicans on the back foot, making sure you're the ones playing offense. you know, because in these policy debates, there is, you know, the people playing offense and the people playing defense. And a lot of times the Republicans are the one on offense and the Democrats are the ones on defense. And the Democrats are very bad at playing defense because they're not able, they are not able or not willing, whatever the case, to turn it around and start playing offense against the Republicans to say, like, why are you, like, doing this, this, and this, instead of saying, like, oh, well, we need to talk about bipartisanship and we need to compromise, we need to, you know, we need to consider the blah, blah, blah. Like, sometimes, even when there's a nuanced discussion to be had, leave the nuance for behind closed doors, come out swinging for the cameras, you know? And then, by virtue of you coming out swinging for the cameras and using very belligerent political rhetoric, then the Republicans will have to start taking you more seriously behind closed doors, and the discussion actually changes to one where, like, you actually are able to get the policies you want, even when you're on defense, or you're able to exact some concessions out of the Republicans for once.
And say, hey, I'm drawing the line, okay? If you don't ever draw the line, every time the Republicans are in office, like Trump, they never talk about the debt ceiling. In fact, we talked about it today on the Young Turks. Steve Bannon was there the first time they raised the debt ceiling under Trump. Now he's like, oh, all the Republicans should be primaried if they voted for this thing. What are you guys talking about? You passed it without a single word, right? So why not pound them on that? Why not say Steve Bannon did it, Donald Trump did it, etc.? Biden doesn't want to fight back because he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it in his heart. If you put me in the ring, by the way, Stephen, probably if you put you in the ring, you'd fight back 10,000 times more. Why? Because you believe it. He doesn't. He wants them to take those hostages. So, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay, yeah. Again, not the strongest version of this argument from Cenk, I think. But he is absolutely right. This is a thing I was saying earlier, that there are not enough ideologically committed people in the Democratic Party at the federal level. Like I said, a lot of them are just technocrats, people who think that this is a purely, like, competence-based endeavor and that you don't have to do any, like, theatrics or whatever. You do need somebody who can do that, who can, like, bring a lot of confrontational rhetoric to the table. Let me rewind this.
He doesn't. Back 10,000 times.
And I think it's a matter of, like, how hard do you believe in it? Like, do you believe in it as a, like, moral principle, or is it just like, yeah, I think this would be good from, like, an accounting perspective or from an investment perspective or something like that? You know, it's that makes a lot of that makes a pretty significant difference, I think.
Times more. Why? Because you believe it. He doesn't. He wants them to take those hostages. So, but it doesn't matter. Assume that he's a saint, and he does.
It's not that, and I think I'll disagree with Cenk partially here. That I don't think it's that Joe Biden wants them to take the hostages. More so that he's not equipped to do politics in that sort of situation where the Republicans are, like, doing the whole, like, taking America hostage thing.
With the Republicans, and golly gee, he doesn't know how to use his mouth. He doesn't know how to fight back. And
somebody in chat said, like, put me in, coach, which is funny. I think, like, unironically, I think there needs to be more politicians in the Democratic Party that just say, like, put me in, coach. Like, let me at him. Let me tell him what I think about him and his policies and whatever.
But that principle, that idea that we just give in to Republicans and we accept loss after loss after loss and go, well, the losses could have been worse. Well, then every time a Democrat gets elected, instead of us winning, we're gonna wind up losing. And that's exactly what's happening here. They're like, hey, don't worry, elect us, we'll get you voting rights, we'll get you minimum wage, we'll get you public option, we'll get you paid family, we'll get you all this stuff. And then you go, oh, no. When the Democrats in charge, we obviously lose because the other side takes hostages and we immediately give in. And when you say, hey, isn't bipartisan a good thing? My answer to that is, fuck no, okay? So it depends on...
This, again, like, I'll kind of agree with Cenk. Bipartisanship is not that good. Like, unironically, that like I've been trained to, because of how Republicans make policy. I know Destiny's laughing here. He probably is going to disagree with this, and I have no doubt that he'll probably say something reasonable in this discussion, anyways. But I honestly think that like any bill that is bipartisan in its composition and is like marketed as a bipartisan thing should actually be viewed with suspicion with respect to like how does it affect the more vulnerable echelons of American society, because ultimately that's what I care about with respect to policymaking. Is like I really don't care very much about the wealthy strata of like, you know, you guys have enough money to take care of yourselves. It's whatever. But like, well, you guys know how I feel. I'm a socialist. Yeah, I think while Cenk is a little bit too emphatic here, I am always really skeptical of stuff that's marketed as like, oh, look at this bipartisan bill. It's like, bipartisan? What's in the bill? What's in the bill, Congressman? Senator? What's in the bill? What did you put in the bill? You know? Because it'll always be like, the bill to provide funding for blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we've also capped funding for this and this, and like, you're not allowed to, we're not going to give money to this anymore. We're going to sunset something or other. It's not like that extreme every time, but there's always like, whenever there's a bipartisan piece of legislation, there's always a really big catch. There's like a huge asterisk that's like going to make me cringe to read into. Whereas if it's just the Democratic Party passing a bill, right, I am much less skeptical of the contents of that bill. So bipartisanship is not good if the Democrats have control of the legislature. Granted, in this sense, negotiating with Republicans is strictly speaking necessary right now because they control the House. But if it's not necessary, why are you doing it? You know? And like and this is the critique I have of the Democrats when they're dealing with this very slim Senate majority. They could just abolish the filibuster. They can get rid of it. But I think at the end of the day, rotating villain strategy, they don't want to, or they aren't actually that committed to it, you know? I'm trying to avoid ascribing intent wherever I can, like moralistic intent, that is, because I'm obviously not in anybody's head except my own. But you know,
what we're agreeing to. So bipartisan by
they are kind of
itself
ghouls, though.
Doesn't mean anything. So if you say bipartisan agreement, for example, under Trump, even Gates and some of the other guys that were very right-wing came in and said, no, we have bipartisan agreement with the progressives that the president must come to authorize war through Congress. Well, I love that bipartisan agreement because that's the thing I agree on. When they have bipartisan agreement to take money from the average American and give it to the richest people in America, which is the bipartisan agreement that they reach 95% of the time.
Yeah.
I hate that bipartisan agreement. To me, being bipartisan is not a value in and of itself. It's just a method to get to a policy that's either good or bad. And the press and Biden, et cetera, celebrated because it's a head fake. It's a distraction. Oh, what we did was terrible, but don't worry. It's moderate. It's bipartisan, these code words that we have trained you to believe are positive, even when you're getting totally screwed on it. And Cenk might not be finished here, but I'll pretty unambiguously agree with him on this point. This might be one of the only points that I have legitimately no critiques of from Cenk's side of things. That, like, yeah. Like, bipartisan bills, it's just part of the process by which you make a bill, and the bill can be good or bad. But it is very often, it's a bludgeon used by like the legacy news to say like, oh, but it was bipartisan, guys, don't worry. It's like, so it still sucks, you know? And very often bipartisanship, because of the Democrats kind of being ineffectual at negotiating, bipartisanship more often than not is a tool that lets Republicans get what they want rather than one that lets the Democrats get what they want.
And of course, it's important to keep in mind that we're only talking about the federal government here. We're talking about Joe Biden and the U.S. Congress. I would have very different things to say state by state, especially when it comes to one of the northern Midwest states, where the Democrats basically turn into the literal vanguard party when they have a 1-vote margin, which is very cool, I think.
And so, and the last thing I'll say is, you know, you mentioned.
Also, quick note: I've gone over time already by about 20 minutes. I think I'm going to try to get about halfway through this debate. This is an hour 21 minutes long. I'm going to try to get to, let's see, that's what, 80 minutes? I'm going to try to get to the 40-minute mark in this debate, and then I will end stream.
A couple of times, hey, at least we didn't get Social Security, Medicare taken away, etc. Steven, you got to acknowledge that's the lowest bar in history. Like, we get the Democrats, the White House, the House and the Senate in the first 2 years. And now, okay, we lost the House by a little bit. And now our bar is we didn't let the Republicans mutilate Social Security and Medicare. No, and plus you got to be honest. I don't mean you, I mean Biden and the Democrats. When you say one thing and then you get into office and you change your tune immediately, you go from I'm going to do it on day one to, oh, it can't be done. There's no way it can be done. Oh, you're lucky I didn't bleed out even more while I was in charge.
Okay. So, okay, here, this should be a rule for every online political commentator, okay? I hate it when people compare Biden to like JFK or Lyndon B. Johnson or any of these prior administrations without looking at the majorities that those guys had in their House and Senate. Biden is fighting.
That's true. That's a very relevant point to bring up. That Biden has a super slim majority in the Senate, if you could even consider it that, and a minority in the House of Representatives. You know, which does sort of put into perspective, like, it is impressive that Joe Biden managed to do some stuff. But I will actually assign some blame to the Democratic Party for the ineffectual nature of the Senate. Clearly, with the way that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have been voting and whatever, the whips in the Senate are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they ought to be facing some, like, ethical investigations for the shit that Dianne Feinstein is being subject to, because Dianne Feinstein is literally, like, going senile. I don't know how polite or not that is to say, but, like, she's clearly losing the mental capacity to serve in office to such an extent that her memory span is shorter than whatever day of the week it is, which is really bad. You know, she missed several votes, and I will attribute the fault of that to the Democratic Party. But on the other hand, it is true that, you know, Lyndon Johnson, FDR are operating with much bigger majorities than the Democrats are right now. And I guess I guess I'll hope that the Democrats get some legislative ground back in the 2024 elections. In fact, if everything goes how it should, the Republicans should get pretty blown out in 2024, given how much of their politics revolves around being anti-trans and being anti-free school lunches and being anti-debt forgiveness and being, like, anti a lot of things that a lot of people would benefit from.
For his life, okay, not only literally, okay, this guy's very old, all right, we saw him trip, okay, a few days ago.
This is true.
Biden is literally and metaphorically fighting for his life every single day he gets out and talks to Congress, okay? He is riding the thinnest fucking majorities, okay, historically, that presidents have ever had. And then we're looking at this guy and it's like, really? You've got the vice president as a tiebreaker in the Senate and you haven't given us single-payer health care yet? You haven't completely dismantled the military-industrial complex? We don't have 15 an hour minimum wage? Where are you doing, Mr.
This is a little bit of a straw man, but yeah, like, look, it is hard, but still, like, I think that, you know, it needs to be reiterated. While there are some respects in which Cenk is probably going a little bit over the top with his criticisms, it is the case that the buck does stop somewhere, and with the presidency, the buck stops with them. And like, with the agenda-setting power that the president has, there should be sort of a convention that they should be able to just get the Senate to do what they want, even if they have the slimmest majority, as is the case in other states. You know, like, state Democratic parties can do that. Why can't the federal Democratic Party do that? I think that's a very valid criticism to raise. But yeah, obviously, like, Very thin margins. That's an issue. Hopefully 2024 is different. But
Biden is doing everything he can. And that.
But at the same time, I'll also say, if the Democrats want people to vote for them in later elections, they have to be a lot more comfortable with running to the left and appealing to a more leftward audience and supporting more leftward policies, which is slowly becoming a thing over time, which I think is good. You know, you got younger congresspeople like Maxwell Frost from Florida. You got John Fetterman, the Betterman, as it were.
That's why I think that as much as it triggers the hell out of some people, I think bipartisanship is an incredibly important step. I think that I'm going to do the progressive thing of like diversity is good for diversity's sake. I think bipartisanship is good for bipartisan's sake because a lot of the issues that we've had running our federal government over the past 20 years have literally been Congress does nothing and we look to the president for executive actions. Even our big immigration policy like DACA came from Obama executive action, or we look to the Supreme Court for everything. All of our civil rights, all of our big civil right legislation, where is that? It doesn't exist. It's come from the Supreme Court. Gay marriage came from the Supreme Court.
Okay. There's a significant agreement I have and a significant disagreement I have. Congress is dysfunctional. No fucking human being with a brain will dispute this, right? Like, solid foundation with which to, like, construct an argument. But at the same time, I think he's absolutely wrong that bipartisanship is valuable in its own right. You know? If a good policy gets passed, good policy gets passed. Doesn't matter who does it. And I think that, like, from a perspective of ensuring good outcomes, it is less reliable of a method to make legislation in a bipartisan manner than it is to make legislation just with one party in power and be like, hey, look, other party doesn't give a shit. Because then, this is actually how you get to the world that Destiny wants, I think, which is the hypothetical world where both the Democratic and Republican parties are reasonable. At least the Republican Party is more reasonable. You actually have to put pressure on the Republican Party to make that happen. You can't just get that to happen. So what needs to happen is that, like Cenk constantly argues in favor of, Democrats need to get a lot more comfortable exercising what political leverage they have and basically point the finger at the Republicans every chance that they get. Be like, these guys are the ones holding everything up. Believe us, we're trying. And, like, the Republicans are responsible for you not having any of these policies that we wanted to pass this cycle. And in order to do that, you have to have good whips, and you have to have Democrats that are actually willing to support the party agenda. You can't be negotiating yourself down, you know, rotating villain strategy, Joe Manchin, blah, blah. You know, you can't be doing that, and you really, really have to, like, well, let me just back it up a little bit. You do have to make that happen as the Democratic Party or as the party in power. You, like, it's not enough to reach out your hand. In fact, the Democratic Party being the leftward party, reaching its hand out to the rightward party only serves to move them further to the right. What the Democratic Party has to do is start moving the other direction to make the Republicans look bad, to try to force them further to the left, back to where the Democratic Party would ideally want policymaking to be, you know? Then you can have a world where maybe the Republican Party is a more neoconservative party that isn't overtly fascist, and then the Democratic Party is a social democratic party, and you get some limited agreements on like policy making. Good stuff gets passed more frequently, and we've now established a better world. Not the world that I would want, but a better world. You know, and I'll see if he substantiates that.
Roe v. Wade Casey came from the Supreme Court. And what happens to things that come from the Supreme Court? The next Supreme Court can take them away. What happens to things that come from executive action?
That's true.
The next executive action or the next Supreme Court can take them away. And I think that this hyperfixation on, no, you know, screw bipartisanship, we're just going to fight with our end of the political spectrum. Our end of the political spectrum is barely winning in the Senate, is no longer winning in the House. So one, I think that focusing on some level of bipartisanship,
I think I would just go back to the, like, Senate House thing where, like, obviously in the House you need to do that. You need to get a couple of Republicans on your side. But in the Senate, you can, as a Democratic Party, you can actually afford to just say, okay, look, everybody vote in line on this one or you're blacklisted. We'll get the vice president to do the tie-breaking vote. I think in any situation where you don't need to do bipartisanship, you should not be doing bipartisanship as the Democratic Party, because the Republicans are already willing to just not, so the Democratic Party can't do this whole, like, take the high road. This is part of the taking the high road thing that I disagree with so vehemently, is that you need to be comfortable just policy making without the approval of the right wing.
In and of itself,
when you can, obviously,
because we
you
have
can't
to be able
always
to bring people in Congress to work together again. This relying on the Supreme Court, especially now with a fucked 6-3 Supreme Court, and this relying on executive action is not a good way to conduct affairs, because any gain we make can be lost at the snap of a finger. Number one, and number two, I feel like the bipartisan push is credited to Biden, because when we look at Democrats, so for instance, you said we gave Democrats the House, we gave Democrats the Senate, we didn't give them the courts, and we gave Democrats the presidency, and then look at what we've done. We've gotten the American Recovery Act, we got the infrastructure bill, we got massive legislation. What did Trump do when he had all 3 and then 4 parts of government? Trump did nothing. He did his big tax cut bill, and that was it. They didn't repeal and replace Obamacare, which I think Republicans have been jerking off about doing for 8 years. Okay, they didn't repeal and replace Obamacare. They didn't make any of the big entitlement cuts they wanted to. They didn't even get their wall funding that they were talking about so much. Trump had to do it via executive action because the president gets wide deference and matters of state security. And they didn't even get the infrastructure bill passed that they said over and over again. Trump said, I could bring people together on infrastructure. He didn't. So the fact that Biden, I understand, especially as a progressive, especially when we want politics to be way further to the left, but that idea of like, well, just because it's bipartisan doesn't mean it's good. I understand wanting to fight against that, but man, when Congress is like so defunct,
okay. I appreciate the olive
anything
branch
passed, let alone the massive legislation Biden has gotten passed. I think he gets credit for that. And I think there's credit where credit is due there.
Okay, so first, Trump actually did the one thing that he and the Republicans cared about, the only thing they cared about, which is tax cuts for the rich. So
that's not the only thing that they cared about, but it is like one of the biggest things. And yeah, that policy, by the way, was like devastating, singularly so. The corporate tax rate, right? Like the highest tax rates, corporate. So it was either top corporate tax or top marginal tax. It was like 35%, which was already down from previous presidential administrations. It used to be something like 90% or like 70, 80%. It was high. Trump cut it by 1/3. It went from 35 to 21%. And Joe Biden hasn't... Well, Joe Biden hasn't done it because he can't do anything, but current administration has not been able to get the tax rate back up to 35%. In fact, they didn't even promise to get it that high. That's one of the big critiques I have, is that they only promised to try to get a corporate tax rate of 28%, which is halfway to what Trump did when he, signed the bill. Which is halfway back to the tax rates that existed before Trump signed that tax cut bill. But no, it's definitely not the only thing Republicans cared about. Destiny's right when he says that, like, they really wanted Obamacare to be gone.
100% mission accomplished. The rest was just, rhetoric. It's like, I'm going to build a wall. They barely even tried until the end, right? So we all know he's a giant liar. We all agree to that, right, et cetera. But the Republicans reveal themselves. What's the major thing that Ronald Reagan did? Giant tax cuts. What's the major thing that George W. Bush did? Giant tax cuts. What's the major thing that Trump did? Giant tax cuts.
That's true.
So they pass the things they want to pass. And every time, oh, golly gee, there was nothing Democrats could do, right? And when they come back in, so here's a great example, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump and the Republicans butcher the tax rates, and they take corporate taxes from 35% to 21%, okay? Then Biden comes in and goes, I'm going to raise those back up to 28%.
Okay, here, he's bringing that up.
Wait, hold on. They were at 35. What do you mean back up to 28? So, okay, already you agree with the tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. Then Manchin says, no, not 28, 25. And Biden instantly
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, fine, 25.
God, Joe Manchin's such an asshat. Yeah.
And then they drop it, and it's still at 21. So, A, he never fought for it. B, he never wanted to increase them back to where they were. That's a fact. There's no disputing that. And then C, he just didn't even try and loves them where they are. I say he loves them, and you can say, hey, no, I disagree with you, Cenk. Biden doesn't love that. He's just just a pathetic ooze of weakness, and he just can't fight back on any of this stuff. And so now that brings us to the point.
I think, okay, this is something that Cenk suffers from whenever he's doing a debate. He loads his statements way too much. Like, he had a good thing going when he was, bringing up that Biden didn't even try to raise the tax rate back to what it was. He already proposed a half measure. And then, promise half, deliver nothing, basically. He let Manchin instantly negotiate him down, effectively the Democrats negotiating themselves down from 28 to 25%, which would still maintain most of the tax cuts from the Trump admin. And then, like Cenk said, they just dropped it. It never came up again. And we haven't heard about it since. And so I think if you were ever going to reasonably infer intent, you would do so here, where clearly the lack of discussion and lack of action on this issue in particular, especially because it's something that was a campaign promise, does indicate the lack of a desire to actually deliver on that
made about
promise.
Well, wait a minute. No, LBJ had big majorities. Did he? He had big majorities of Democrats. But remember, a giant portion of those Democrats were Dixiecrats. And we didn't just rely on the Supreme Court to pass legislation, to pass
actually don't know where I'm supposed to go.
Things that we agree with policies, right? And it's kind of funny to say the Supreme Court is passing it.
Try going this way.
But that was the only functioning body we had left, because in my opinion, the donors bought everything else, and that they love the status quo. They ground everything.
God, every time he starts talking about the donors, I kind of cringe nowadays. Because funny thing is that that's kind of what got me into more socialistic thinking in the first place. That obviously there's all this money in politics where moneyed interests determine what is or isn't politically acceptable before it even gets to a discussion, right? Because not just because of the whole campaign finance law stuff that Cenk talks about a lot, but also because of the nature of how a liberal democracy works and how it constantly revolves around protecting business interests over a lot of other things. Anyways.
Johnson passed the Voting Rights Act, and he passed the Civil Rights Act, and he passed them through Congress, and he passed them despite the fact that a giant percentage of his party were Dixiecrats who ran on segregation, on being racist, and it cost them their careers. But he actually fought. He fought like hell for it.
I think, and actually, I think that a better way to put the sort of moneyed influence in politics would be that there's the revolving door of politics. People from industry go and work in politics, and then once they get out of politics, they go back and work in that industry. And while they're in politics, they're tasked with regulating and creating laws pertaining to those industries. And while they're at those industries, they're tasked with lobbying in politics to get favorable policy treatment from other people who are, for the most part, doing the same thing. There are some rare exceptions to this, like the progressive Democrats in the House, like AOC, all those people. But it is certainly the case that the money plays a role in change not happening, at least not as much as it should.
And then, no, and on segregation, on bottom their hatred, and I'm going to defeat the Republicans' lust for greed. These are super strong words, and he would use words like that all the time, which leads me to my other point, which is, how do you think they got those giant majorities?
That's true. Populist rhetoric, I will say this might be one of Destiny's, well, maybe not his weakness. He's a very competent debater, obviously. But one of the weaknesses of being a neoliberal, self-proclaimed establishment hack is that the sort of unwillingness to use populist rhetoric means that you're not going to be able to inspire a lot of passionate support from people. And that works to your detriment in elections, which means it will then work to your detriment in policymaking. And Lyndon Johnson being able and willing to use that kind of rhetoric has, no doubt, had an effect in being able to get that stuff passed, because it makes his opponents look bad. Basically saying, hey, you are opposed to all these pretty unequivocally good things that we want to pass. You are enemies of the people for not wanting people to have healthcare, for wanting, well, more racism too, even. You know.
Majorities. Remember, FDR took over from a Republican. It's not like it was already a big Democratic majority for him. No, he took over and built a giant Democratic majority by fighting for us, by getting results like Social Security.
That's true, by the way. The New Deal programs, a lot of those were the first FDR administration. He was elected in what was it, 32? Herbert Hoover was the president from like 1929 to 1933. And then FDR became president in 1933. And then by the time the elections of 1936 came around, everybody loved him, you know? And, you know, Cenk is right that, like, just because you don't have a majority now does not really absolve you of responsibility. It's on you to build that majority and to get the policies that you want passed. Like, basically, you have to start this snowball effect. And Joe Biden, I think what he's arguing here, Joe Biden hasn't put the work in to start that, really. I'm not sure how agreeable that would be, but, like, certainly there's more that the Democratic Party could and should be doing, at the very least, to work with Joe Biden. Because I think this might be missing the forest for the trees a little bit. Some of the topics of debate here. The Democratic Party, funnily enough, even though I might not agree that Joe Biden is himself a progressive in terms of like American progressivism now, he's definitely to the left of a lot of Democrats, especially in the federal government, in the legislature. And I think they need to get in line with him. You know, if we're going for the perspective, like, you know, well, he should get his agenda passed.
So many of the other things that he did after the Depression. And one thing now, back to the current day. You mentioned one thing I want to talk about. You strawmanned a little bit, and maybe you're not strawmanning for other people, but for me, I don't come in and go, oh my God, I want a single payer overnight. No, in fact.
Okay, there we go.
If you remember the Jimmy Dore clowns did the force the vote in the beginning, and they're like, we're gonna force the Nancy Pelosi speaker vote thing so we can get a vote on Medicare for all. I'm like,
yeah, that was pretty dumb.
Guys, you're not gonna win that. You have no alternative to Nancy Pelosi. And there's no chance Medicare for all passes. So why don't you do something that's actually winnable, use your leverage and power to ask for something we actually can win on, like, for example, $15 minimum wage, because they already promised it 8 ways to Sunday. They said they were definitely going to do it. So then you use all of your leverage and power to get the things that.
That's true. That's one bit of political leverage that absolutely could have been used and should have been used. And I think it's shameful that it wasn't, because in this case, the Democratic Party explicitly promised a federal minimum wage of $15. Once they saw how much popularity Bernie Sanders was getting for saying that, regardless of whether it was for, you know, the support that it would gain, or whether it was fear that, like, the Sanders wing would take over, just as like a pacifying measure or whatever. You know, they definitely did, paint themselves into a corner with that one.
That you can get done,
Democrats
but then you could build from there, right? So we didn't ask for the moon in the sky. We asked for very reasonable things that corporate Democrats said that they were in favor of. But instead, we didn't even get the bare minimum. Voting rights was supposed to be the bare minimum. And honestly, Stephen, that one shocked me. My bar, as you can tell, for establishment Democrats is very, very low. I have almost no expectations of them. But I thought they would do half the voting rights bill. The anti-corruption stuff written by Larry Lessig, godfather campaign finance reform movement. I remember talking to Larry about it, and I said, brother, I love you, but there's no way in the world they're going to pass anti-corruption stuff. It's not just the Republicans. The Democrats are just as corrupt when it comes to taking campaign money. So he's
delving a little bit into the anecdotes here. I think this kind of hurts his argument. It's a little bit winding, but
that part has no hope. The gerrymandering thing would be brilliant, but I think very little hope, because the Democrats are also complicit in that. But the other half, they needed for their own victories. They needed black people to be able to vote so Democrats could win. But Biden wouldn't even do that. No, and Stephen, they betray themselves. Last thing here, because there is one time they lifted the filibuster. They say, oh, the filibuster is immutable. The parliamentarian rules us. Does she? I didn't know we were in a parliamentary.
Oh yeah, that was so stupid, by the way. Another like thing that's basically inexcusable on the part of the Democrats. I don't know how effectively Cenk is going to make the argument here, but like this is, if ever there was an indication of intentionality, but barring what I said before even, it would be this. Like the parliamentarian has no power. Not even like nowhere is it written anywhere. They're just an unelected staffer. And they were like, oh, well, this one staffer said we can't do it. So I guess we can't do it. Which was what? It was lifting the filibuster, right?
Last thing here. Because there is one time they lifted the filibuster. They say, oh, the filibuster is immutable. The parliamentarian rules us.
Oh, yeah. Like, with regards to removing the filibuster, like, that was so stupid. And the Democrats, the thing that the Democrats would claim, by the way, because they have claimed this, is that the Republicans are going to use this against us later. So fucking what? They were going to do that anyway. Just because you don't lift the filibuster now, you're going to appease the Republicans. Appeasement has never been a reliable strategy in anything. Like, preemptively ceding ground on that to the Republicans is such a stupid idea. Like, because you should be operating with the assumption, okay, Republicans are going to lift the filibuster because they did that under Trump's presidency. So we should do it. We should do it to make our policy agenda that much more easy to achieve. But I think, they're not actually that committed to doing that. They're either A, aren't enough ideologues, or B, people present are all doing the rotating villain shit. They don't actually want to achieve a lot of the stuff that's on their policy agenda, because then they have nothing to campaign on. They would have to come up with something new.
Does she? I didn't know we were in a parliamentarian system or parliament system. But no, they did lift they didn't give a damn about the parliamentarian. They did lift the filibuster once to raise the debt ceiling in the first 2 years.
Yes, that's right. That did happen.
When it affected the stock market, all of a sudden the filibuster is irrelevant.
Yeah.
When it came to voting rights for African Americans, oh, no, nothing we could do. Filibuster. The Democrats' best friend.
Oh man, I guess there's I guess I'll give some like mid-debate conclusion here, because I'm about at the point where I think I want to end stream and stuff. Yeah, there's some stuff that I agree with Cenk on here. In fact, I agree with quite a bit of Cenk's stuff, points. I agree with some of Destiny's points as well. I think Destiny has a much more level-headed approach to politics, at least in the procedural sense. But I think Destiny is extending a little bit much charitability, excuse me, to the Democratic Party here. Yeah, I guess I'll come back to it next time. This has been almost a 3-hour live stream. It's 4:15. So I'm gonna go back and see who's live. It's fucking 90 degrees in my room. It's hot as hell in here. Let's raid Cody Schwab, and I'll see you guys next time. Anywho. I will now... Here we go. I will now resume a coverage of the debate.
System or parliament system.
Ah, okay. All right, and it actually remembered where I was, more or less. Okay. So where were we? They were talking about Joe Biden, probably.
The Democrats' best friend.
I think so.
What was he saying?
Filibuster is irrelevant. When it came to voting rights for African Americans, oh no, nothing we could do. Filibuster.
Ah, yes, I remember this policy debate.
We can move on from here. I'll give a thing and then you can give a trick, because obviously we can go back and forth this forever. I would like to contextualize where Biden sits at right now on the precipice of extremist disaster in U.S. history. We came off of what is arguably, I'm not going to say the most conservative president ever, because I don't even know if Trump is truly conservative, but I'll say like the most like fascist president ever, at least in my lifetime from what I've seen.
Yeah.
We went from that to a crazy packed conservative Supreme Court, to a Republican House and Senate, and we have slingshotted from that all the way to Biden, and then a liberal majority in the Senate, barely, and House, Senate if you have Vice President, and House, and then from there, after we went from the most fascist regime ever back to Biden, I will agree that it's not like we don't live in the progressive utopia, but we got legislation that is like giving out unbelievable amounts of stimulus to low-income Americans. When you talk about that expansion of the child tax credit, that was insane. When you talk about some of the huge investments in green energy we've made, I'm pretty sure the largest in U.S. history as part of the infrastructure bill, that was insane. When you talk about...
I have a couple critiques. I'm going to pause before he finishes. Obviously, all of the things he's talking about are major victories for Joe Biden. But with regards to the income, not the income tax credit, the child tax credit. Maybe those are the same thing, whatever. That was temporary. It actually ended. So low-income Americans, you know, who benefited from the child tax credit are no longer getting the economic stimulus that Destiny rightly says is a good thing. That's one hole in this argument, I guess. Again, like he's saying, obviously this was never going to be like progressive utopia territory, right? Like Joe Biden's still a neolib. But then also, oops, might be. But then also about, what was he saying here? It was about.
Pretty sure the largest in U.S. history as part of the infrastructure bill. That was insane.
Yeah, green energy. Okay, the green energy thing is like is good, but it's not really indicative of anything good that's going to happen in the future. What I mean by that is like, you can invest all the money you want into green energy right now. You have to go insanely hard on the side of like penalizing fossil fuel usage if you want green energy to become the actual like primary source of energy for the United States, or for, you know, for any country really. So like ultimately the infrastructure stuff, the investment or whatever, is good and is very clearly better than nothing. But if the objective here is truly to like turn America into like the pioneer of green energy, just about, you have to start using policymaking as a weapon to penalize companies that go with fossil fuels instead, which won't happen because it's so damn profitable for the fossil fuel companies and whatever. And there's just not as much profit to be had in I think the renewable energy industry. Either that or something to do with, I think, market saturation. It's much more easy for fossil fuel companies to manipulate the market for that, because renewable energy has not even close to reached market saturation yet. So there's like, from a capitalist perspective, there's no reason to go that route, at least not to commit to that route. And that's why you should give them a reason in the form of, we will take shit tons of money from you if you don't. Do I care about discharge? No, I don't. But I'll let him finish here. Ultimately, actually, no, before I do that. Ultimately, like, if we want green energy, honestly, Greta Thunberg is right. It's going to take transcending capitalism to get a world where we're chiefly using green energy. Or, you know, at the very least, we're going to have to rein in capitalism so hard that it might as well not even be capitalism anymore.
When you talk about, I'm pretty sure, the Respect for Marriage Act that got rid of the prior, I think, Defensive Marriage Act from the 90s, that we managed to codify some rights around gay marriage. That's insane. The fact that we were able to do these things.
I will say, though, like with the Respective Marriage Act, that was a pretty big W. And that one is, like, permanent. The only thing is, like, it has some sort of provision that allowed certain states to not recognize whatever. It was relatively minor. That one was a big win.
We're at that extreme of a position, and then we came back, and now we're at Biden, and now we're fighting on these things. Again, I think he gets a lot of credit for that, for being legislatively more effective than Trump. He has been, and for doing this following what is probably the most divisive presidency in U.S. history. I don't think half of Republicans even fucking think that election was real still, because these guys are out here waiting for the magical Supreme Court decision that's going to overturn the prior election or whatever. I guess, like, the thing that I guess I'm kind of summarizing the list for is, like, I don't know what Biden is supposed to do. You know, we can talk about LBJ and the Dixiecrats, and, you know, we can talk about, well, you know, these guys fought and they fought and they fought, but these guys had strong grounds to stand on. We are so divided as a country today. Like I said, I'm pretty sure over a quarter of Americans don't even believe the last election was real. And the stuff that we're fighting about today is so much more nebulous or amorphous than, like civil rights, right? Like we probably should have the same civil rights across the entire country. That's a lot easier than how do we legislate like gerrymandering and, voting and everything in the United States. That gets a lot more hairy when we try to figure it out. So yeah, I agree that I wish that Biden could do more, but I'm not entirely sure what he can do. There's like no position for strategic maneuvering here. All it takes is like Manchin or Sinema to be like, you know what? I'm not going along with this. And it's like, well, fuck me. We got 49, 48 in the Senate.
Yeah, I think Destiny definitely, this is an epic pause for him, definitely has a point here about Joe Biden having limited like ability to actually make these policies. Like he has to wait for them to get to his desk at the end of the day to pass them. I think it takes stronger unity and a stronger ideological commitment in the Democratic Party. This is going to be a reiteration of all the shit I was saying last time, is that the Democratic Party needs ideologues. It needs people who are like actually committed to not like just this neoliberal sort of proceduralism, but an actual like, I will be as corrupt as I need to. I will bend every institution as far as it needs to go to raise the minimum wage, to get people free healthcare, and basically to bring the US up to date with every social democracy in Europe, if not start pushing past that. That's even just from a social democratic perspective, not even touching socialism. We have a long way to go in that department. And I think I would attribute a lot of that to the Democratic Party because they've been unwilling to take those steps. As much as I would definitely also attribute that to the Republican Party for being, well, neocons and fascists who actually want to go backwards because they preferred when black people couldn't vote.
I guess we're done completely, and now we're just lame ducking it for 4 years until hopefully we do better in the next election.
Okay, I can go on forever on
sure.
Although I do disagree with the notion that like because Joe Biden doesn't have the majority, I disagree that he has to like do lame duck or whatever. Although maybe Destiny was making that comment facetiously. It's hard to tell. I have a dry wit myself, but sometimes I have a hard time detecting it from other people if I haven't watched a ton of their content. And well, I haven't watched Destiny anything. I think this is the first thing of his that I've watched.
I'll give you the last word on this section. Go.
No, wait, that's not true. I saw the debate where he and Vosh teamed up against Stryker and that other Nazi guy.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. Look, yes, I think Trump is a fascist. I think he would end democracy. We agree there. But that's, again, a super low bar. Hey, I'm not Mussolini is not a great campaign slogan.
This is true.
Credit was fantastic. You go back to our videos, you'll see we give a ton of credit for that. But as usual, once it ran out, they just dropped it. They never went back to it. So
that's true. That's my critique as well. I don't know how well Cenk is going to like put this, but
they drop every progressive proposal instantly. But that Mountain Valley Pipeline for Joe Manchin, they brought it back 3-4 times until they finally put it in a bill for no reason at all, and they put it in because Joe Biden always wanted to do the Mountain Valley Pipeline.
Oh yeah, that's true. I think Cenk is right to bring this up. That the Democratic Party has been much more committed to expanding like drilling operations and building pipelines and stuff than it has been to like starting up the push on renewable energy and stuff. There were like a couple of pipelines that were built, not just in West Virginia, I think somewhere else as well, that were like tar sands. It was like, hey, we found the one thing worse than fucking we found the one thing worse than natural gas fracking, and then they did that. It's like new fossil fuel unlocked, coal 2 worse edition or some shit like that. And I think that is a major point against the Democrats.
Joe Biden is Joe Manchin. There was just so gratuitous to put that in the bill, okay? And then finally, what can he do?
Right,
just a short version of it is paid family leave at 84%. So you go out and you do press conference every single day. You have the largest microphone in the world, and you go, hey, 84%. Or do we live in a democracy or don't we? Did you know that 74% of Republicans want paid family leave? Did you know that Estonia has 82 weeks of paid family leave, and we have none, 0. You have a baby, and the woman's supposed to go back into the coal mines, back in the assembly lines. Why are 3/4 of Republicans being ignored by their own politicians? That's because they're corrupt.
By the way, I think this is it's a good point from Cenk that like the polling on certain issues, especially like economic issues, is not being accounted for enough in the national debate about this stuff. And see, the reason it's not is pretty transparently just because the companies make more money from these policies not being implemented, family leave in particular, or at least there's a perception of that. I think if you did some actual economic analysis on the subject, you would find that like production is way better actually when mothers don't have to go to work and endure postpartum depression immediately after their kid is born and whatever. But you know, companies don't really think like that. They think of, well, we would have to pay money for family leave to be a thing. And so they don't do it. Whereas in Europe, it's a pretty ubiquitous practice. And I think, you know, obviously I don't want to go full argumentum ad populum or whatever, because just because something's popular doesn't mean it's good. But on economic issues, it's a very, very strong indicator of where your country is versus the rest of the world. Especially like family leave, there's basically no excuse for. You know, your employer could, by the goodness of their own heart, give you some time off, but it's not mandated that they do that. Like, there's no guarantee that you'll actually get any time off, like parental leave. Oh yeah, Squirtle. Nice. I don't remember where you get Bulbasaur though. Oh, no, I think I know. Name you, Whirly. Yeah.
Corporate lackeys. You fight, right? But Biden and corporate Democrats don't want to fight. They got no fight in them. I just wish they'd get the hell out of the way. So, like, that's why I formed Rebellion PAC in the first place. Let's get some grassroots funding, rebellionpac.com, okay? And let's go kick these guys' ass.
Dude, the fact that Cenk did a plug, okay, that's kind of cringe.
How it's actually done.
Cringe.
Can we find, I'm just curious if we can find agreement here or not. I feel like, in my opinion, the best way to pass a more progressive agenda is to get people to vote out Republicans, as many Republicans as possible. That if the Democrats had wider margins.
This is partly true, by the way. I'll agree with Destiny on this, is that like and I think this actually matters more for the state level than at the federal level. People do need to get out and vote, but at the same time, you have to actually give them a compelling reason to do so. Like in the United States, voting day is not a holiday. Voting is not required. You know, there's no like structures and incentive structures in place to guarantee that everybody can vote on voting day if they want to. It's ultimately like some people have worked that day. Some people work at like places that are open every day of the week, even holidays and whatever. Places that have to run on holidays and whatnot. And so of course they're going to be running on voting day. That's not even a holiday. It's just not. It's not. It's not the whole picture, I think. You know, because at the federal level, Democrats tend to be very centrist and whatnot. I think the asterisk I would add to Destiny's argument is we need to elect progressives specifically. Any old Democrat won't cut it. If you can get a Democrat, cool. Like, obviously the Democrats are preferable over Republicans, but I want to emphasize that progressive Democrats are definitely necessary in order to achieve any of the policy outcomes that we want. As, I don't know, progressives, which I'm sure Destiny would describe himself as. But for me as a socialist, I guess he would care a little bit less about that because he's a liberal.
margins in the House or the Senate, we'd see something get done differently. Because it feels like right now the fixation is like, okay, you know, I know we've got very slim majorities, but we need to get rid of some of these Democrats. We need to get some more progressive Democrats in there. I feel like they'd be in the same position, you know, like you even said, like that forced the vote on like Medicare for all. Like, what's the point, right? If you don't have the majorities in Congress to get it done, but you don't agree with that, yeah? Would you?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I guarantee you that that if they had a majority of 4, all of a sudden there would be 4 Democrats that were holding out, not just 2, like Manchin and Sinema. They'd all of a sudden it'd be Coons and Carper as well. If they had a majority of 8, all of a sudden it would be 8 Democrats holding out, because I've covered politics for 25 years and I've seen them do it over and over and over again. And so and in fact, Jayapal just gave away the game. Theoretical head of the Progressive Caucus, or the caucus is theoretical.
He's right, by the way. Cenk is right. That the more centrist Democrats will absolutely do that, which is why you need to elect Democrats who are a little bit more committed to an actual like vision of what they think America should be, instead of like the careerists, like people who see this as a job that you're applying for and whatever, rather than politics. Here, hold on. Where do you get Bulbasaur? No, goddammit. I'm trying to look for where to get Bulbasaur, and then I'll get back to the debate. Okay. Where? Okay. I understand now. Alright. I was gonna say, wow, this article is really dragging its feet in terms of...
And she said, well, look, we showed them, we voted no. Now, if they needed the votes, we would have given it to them, but we voted no to show that we disagree. Well, then you just gave away the game, brother, or sister in that case. Okay, so you're just saying, oh, we're just faking it out here. So however many Democratic votes they need to pass these awful bills, we'll always give it to them. But we're going to pretend that we're against this bill because they don't need our votes. That's the kind of gamesmanship that happens. And so, I mean, I guess that's a core disagreement. I don't think that they're golly gee honest people that went to Washington and Mr. Smith just couldn't pull it off. No, they all get massive funding from corporations, corporate donors, PACs, super PACs, and they do exactly as they're told.
But then if that's the...
So, conspiratorial framing aside, Cenk is not that great of a rhetorician here. When the key is to be like level-headed in the debate, whatever. It is absolutely true that the rotating villain strategy applies to like a lot of different politicians. So like, if you had a Democratic majority of like 55 to 45 in the Senate, right? But some of the Democrats, like a lot of the Democrats, are centrists and not like progressives, social democrats, then it would definitely be the case, because this has happened before, where all of a sudden 6 Democrats are the rotating villains. Like all of a sudden 6 Democrats will routinely be against certain bills that come into the Senate, because the whole party doesn't actually like them, because it's a center liberal party, but they understand that it's optically a bad look for them to not support insert bill here. Let's say it is a food stamp expansion bill or whatever. That's something I could see being voted on at the national level. Or let's just say it's the Voting Rights Act that was up for discussion in 2019 or something like that. Let's say it's this new Voting Rights Act that's meant to sort of reify some of the protections given to black people at the ballot box by way of like restricting certain things that states will do to try to disenfranchise black people. And it gets to the Senate, and then, whoa, what's this? All of a sudden, 6 of the 55 Democrats don't support the bill, which means that the Republicans could just vote it down with the help of those 6. And that's because the Democratic Party, as sort of a block, that's not to say every Democrat, but as a block, the Democratic Party didn't want that bill to pass. But they knew that it would look really bad if Democrats all voted no on the Voting Rights Act. So 6 of them defect. It's a pretty well-known political strategy. And I think one of the problems there is that the United States doesn't have any way of guarding against that. I recently learned about systems in like in Spain. There is a provision of their law or constitution or whatever. It is actually a finable offense to vote against your party line. So if the party line, even if your party doesn't actually believe the party line, is we are in favor of the Voting Rights Act, you have to vote for the Voting Rights Act. Because, you know, let's be real, you didn't vote for a politician for them to then break ranks and say, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to vote for all the things I promised. You know, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. And I will absolutely agree. That's how politics works. But there's also things that you can do to change how politics works in such a way that you do actually get people who will vote the way you want. All that to say, I think Cenk is not phrasing this point correctly, but I do agree that, like, it's not enough just to get anybody with a D elected. Anybody with, like, a D next to their name, like Democrat. It has to be somebody who has indicated some level of comfort with the progressive movement.
Case, then why engage with the political system at all? Because now we're back at the square zero. Because now it feels like, yeah, why bother voting or anything if they're all bought and paid for?
No. I don't want people to get discouraged. I'm captain of Team Hope. Okay, so that's why I helped to form Justice Democrats, because my thesis was,
Cenk, please stop plugging
from corporate PAC money. They could actually be honest, and that's why. Is it random that AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar were the most visible
I'm going to cheat
Democrats when they first got elected? And then Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, these are all big names you've heard over and over again.
Yeah, but they're winning in plus 40, but they're winning in plus 40 blue districts, right?
Well, that's important though. Like and also I think this misses a key thing, which is that progressives also perform well in red districts. Better than establishment Democrats anyway. In fact, when Democrats run to the center, they lose support. I think, you know, it would be a key point to bring up that in 2022, during the what was it? The midterm elections up in New York, the Democrats got blown out because they had centrist leadership and they focused more on excluding progressives than they did on distinguishing themselves from Republicans. So I think that Cenk is more correct than Destiny. Well, I'll see what Destiny has to say, but
right, this is why when the progressives were talking about, like, well, we're going to get a progressive in for Manchin, they got slaughtered. That's why people like Nina.
That one's true, though. There are environments where that doesn't work, but I would say that more often than not, this does work, running economically to the left.
Turner, even when they fundraise their opponent.
But you have to be aware of your state politics. That's one thing that's, like, very weird about U.S. politics, is that, like, you have to like, running for the national legislature, you have to know the politics of your state. It's kind of bizarre. Oops. And that's possibly one of the reasons that progressives did not win in West Virginia.
2-1 get destroyed.
I think honestly though, like, running on policy, if we're talking purely from a campaigning perspective, a familiarity with the, like, polling numbers and opinions of people in your state is necessary for that to work. Yeah, there we go. All right. I've got it.
Destroyed. I don't think there's much credit for progressives that are winning in massively blue districts and then attacking the rest of the Democratic Party from the safest seats of the United States.
No.
Okay, yeah, I will agree with that then. Like, the focus here ultimately is on fighting the Republicans. But to do that, God, it's tricky for me to navigate my way between these guys' arguments because a lot of what they're saying doesn't necessarily contradict each other.
No, so Stephen, first of all, when we won a lot of those battles, they were not a given at all. AOC beating Joe Crowley in that primary was one of the biggest upsets in political history, in American history. And so now all of a sudden, they always turn impossible to inevitable, right? It was always going to happen. No, it wasn't. There was massive victories in there, okay? And so, but the reason that they fought loudly and strongly for their voters in the beginning was because they're not taking corporate PAC money. It's the donors that hold them back. Go, oh, don't do class warfare. Whoa, don't do that. Don't do this, don't do that. That's why the corporate Democrats are always hiding. They're hiding in a cave. So yes, no, there's something you could do. You vote in primaries first, because one, you got to get the corrupt Democrats out because they're just gonna vote with the Republicans anyway on economic issues. But number two, you actually need, when they get into office, for them to vote the right way and to be untethered from the corruption. And I'll give you an ironic example. Matt Gaetz, terrible guy, was on the show. We yelled at him. We yelled back and forth, got no love for him, right? But he decided not to take corporate PAC money. And then lo and behold, he was the one Republican that proposed an anti-corruption bill. You got to get him out of the minute you detach them from the donors, they become honest. And they might be honestly awful like Matt Gaetz. They might be honestly wonderful like some of the Justice Democrats. But all of a sudden you get your democracy back a little bit.
That's true. I think that's true. He's okay. Cenk narrativizes this in such a way that I think he paints an overly idealistic picture, partly because he probably believes in it. But it is the case that like corporate money flowing around in politics a lot is absolutely a reason that a lot of politicians are not willing to do certain things that might be construed as populism, or like basically any economically left-leaning program is held back by the fact that politics is disproportionately controlled by, well, rich people with money, people who directly fund campaigns and participate in the revolving door of politics and that sort of thing, and as a result have a vested interest in protecting economic hierarchies.
And so if we don't get money out of politics, then yes, in the long term it's hopeless. But we must get money out of politics.
Okay, I mean, like, I feel like the more important thing would be flipping Republican votes to Democrat and then fighting from there, rather than trying to flip Dem to blue or Dem. But
I think, okay.
I think we disagree on that. We could go back and forth on that, probably forever.
And by the way, Stephen, I'll just say real quick, that's why I formed Justice Democrats, so that we can
He's plugging again, god dang it.
Wolf that bipartisan Democratic vote there and pass them to politics, because and you couldn't do it, but you got to get past the.
It's not like having a lot of progressives in Congress. I understand what you're saying. I just like it's not like having a lot of progressives in Congress have helped at all, right? Like the seats that are more important are going to be the ones in the middle anyway, right? Our mansions and our cinemas, because the reason why those seats are important is because we know that those are the only types of Democrats that can hold those seats, right? If AOC starts saying, "Well, I'm not voting with the party, anything, screw you guys, I want a more progressive agenda," okay, fine. Eventually, she'll get primaried by somebody else, but that's always going to be a Democratic seat. That's always going to be a safe seat. We're not worried about losing it. I think that's why we fight for those seats in the middle so much more. On the Republican side as well, I think that's why those seats in the middle are so much more valuable, why people fight over them so much more. And I feel like that's why we should be trying to expand our majorities rather than purity testing the seats that are the furthest to the left that aren't as valuable anyway.
So, Stephen, in my opinion, there's a fundamental misperception in there in the first place, because Joe Manchin is not the only kind of guy who could win in West Virginia. West Virginia is very populist. They're more populist than they are conservative, right? The reason Manchin wins is because mainstream media gives him tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in free positive coverage. They call him moderate, right? But if you look at his policy positions, literally none of them are moderate. He takes extreme right-wing positions where the country's not. For example, 3/4 of the country wants to raise taxes on the rich. Joe Manchin comes on TV and goes, "I'm a moderate, I want to cut taxes on the rich, I'm reasonable," right? That's not the moderate position. That's a tiny extremist minority of the country. And what does corporate media do? Moderate. No, you go in and you run populist and you say to people, "Goddamn right, we're going to tax the rich. We're going to finally get justice. You're paying your taxes every day. The middle class gets screwed day in and day out. It's time that the rich pay their fair taxes. It's time that you get to spend time with your baby when you deliver. I can go on and on. You go populist and you could win so many more of those seats rather than the fake moderates that are
sure.
Okay, I think I've let it go on for a bit here because I do want to finish this debate this time. I think Cenk's point about populism is strongest in the case of West Virginia because West Virginia is, let's be real, it's not a wealthy state. It really is not. You know, and I think that if somebody like ran with a populist angle behind them, like people in West Virginia are pretty desperate for anything that appeals to them. Because here's the thing, right? Despite the fact that Joe Manchin has like been getting elected in West Virginia and all that, nobody likes the guy. Like, people in his own state do not like him. People fucking hate Joe Manchin. They hate Kyrsten Sinema. But they have a unique grasp of the political system, the parts of the political system that specifically do not rely on popular vote or popular support to stay in power. You know, basically playing the game, like threading the line of lesser evilism, right? And so I think, honestly, it would be a good strategy for people to start, or for like the Democratic Party to start trying to nudge West Virginia to the left with economically populist messaging. That is to say, economically left-leaning messaging, more overtly. Just don't call it anything like that. But, you know, again, Destiny is making good arguments here, but I think he does kind of miss out on the fact that, like, the Democratic Party oftentimes is holding itself back. You know, and I would agree with him. We shouldn't be doing all the infighting crap, which might be why, you know, you wait until 2026. 2024, when is Joe Manchin up for election? You wait till his next election to primary him, when you're pretty sure you're also going to get some other seats. But one thing's for sure is that if you want to have a Democratic Party that can actually accomplish any of the objectives that both Destiny and Cenk and myself want to be accomplished, you can't have Joe Manchin there anymore. You can't have Kyrsten Sinema there anymore. They've got to go. And so you should probably do a combination of getting enough Democrats elected, left-leaning Democrats elected, that Manchin and Sinema's support are no longer necessary, and then either kick them out of the party, right? Like Sinema, I think Sinema left on her own, but she still caucuses with the Democrats or whatever. Either kick them out of the party or primary them with new, like, preferred candidates and deny them the institutional platform of the party. Something like that. That's the party strategist in me. I'm sure there's plenty of political consultants out there that would disagree with me, probably because they like Joe Manchin. But I think there is a synthesis to be had here. And like, there is actually a path that you could take to win as the Democrats, that they're just not taking. And I think Cenk is correct in sort of trying to gesture at that. I don't think he's making the best direct argument for this, but yeah.
But I mean, the reality is Manchin voted with Biden's agenda 88% of the time, right? Like, he didn't vote for
what, on post offices?
It's better than having a Republican in there. I mean, how many of the Republicans are voting?
That much is true, but like that 12% is pretty key stuff. Like, what a lot of people miss out on, right, is that 88% is none of the flashy media stuff that actually gains ground for your party. He's just enough. He's like barely not enough of a liability to the party. He's not doing anything for them, but he's also not really doing anything against them, right? Like, Joe Manchin voted against the Voting Rights Act, voted against the fucking, God, there's quite a few bills that he voted against. Here, hold on. Joe Manchin vote. Oh yeah, that's right. He was one of the instrumental parties in negotiating down the infrastructure bill when that was going through Congress. You know, so the final, like, vote isn't necessarily reflective of how much of a benefit they are to their party.
on Biden's agenda 88% of the time, right? That's what I'm saying. If another Democrat can win in West Virginia, then go for it. My understanding is the last time somebody tried to primary Manchin, the guy got like 30% of the vote, I think. I don't even remember the name.
It's actually, I think it was worse than that. So it was Paula Jean Swearengin. And
yeah, poor person,
but not the greatest candidate.
Sure.
You know, and so, look, if you need someone who's a quality candidate, yes. But honestly, the hardest thing in the world is to get past the mainstream media, because they'll just smear you to death, and so they do it to all the progressives, and so, but but I would argue, and now we're going to get too far down this rabbit hole, and we have very little time left. But I'll just say, I think Manchin, in a lot of ways, does more damage than a Republican, because he validates the Republican position by saying, "I agree with it, and hence it's bipartisan." Hence, it's moderate. Hence, it's the reasonable position. And so I think that does way more damage than just a regular Republican who just seems like an extremist. He makes their extremist positions look good, and that's a world of damage.
Like, do you think like if Manchin wasn't in the Senate, do you think that we would have Jackson as a Supreme Court? Like, do you think that would, like, because I understand the frustration, because I feel it too. Okay, I'm not a Manchin or a Sinema fan. I don't think Sinema's a Democrat anymore. Isn't she an independent now? I'm not fans of these senators. I agree, and it sucks that it feels like, like they have so much sway over the party. But I mean, like, this is how politics always works. If you go to countries, for instance, that have multi-party systems, oftentimes you'll get a majority government formed, and all of a sudden that little party with like 6 seats is calling the shots on the majority government because people need those votes. And I feel like Manchin and Sinema to be the same.
That's true. That happens.
But I mean, like, when we look at I don't even know how to pronounce her first name. For Jackson for the Supreme Court.
Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yeah.
When you look at the major legislation that was passed, like almost along party lines in the Senate, Manchin sucks, but a Republican there is like game over. Like, now we can't even complain about how bad our legislation is because there's no legislation to even speak of. We would just have a lame duck president.
Yeah. So
that is a valid point. The fact that, like, that's one of the things, I guess, you could make the argument for, like, Joe Manchin being a boon to the Democratic Party when it comes time to vote. But as far as the PR war, right? Like, Joe Manchin's definitely a detriment to his own party, right? And this is like the Democratic Party is a coalition in a coalition government setting and whatever. You know, I do agree with Cenk that, like, we eventually have to replace these people. Holy shit. Because, like, so much of the part of politics that people who are voting for politicians see is what they see on TV or what they read in the news, whatever. So when they see Joe Manchin up there every day being like, yeah, I'm a Democrat and I support every economic position that Republicans have, you know, it's like, it's going to further push people into that spot. It was like, what the fuck? Then why should I vote? If you're just gonna screw me over as hard as the Republicans, or you're gonna let this one guy stand in your way, you know.
First, by the way, that's another one to give credit to Biden on. I think Justice Jackson has been really good so far. She was the lone vote in a critical union case where even Sotomayor and Kagan voted the wrong way, and it was 8-1. And yeah, so
that was devastating.
It's a balancing act. We have I don't want people to misinterpret my passion for being impractical. No, you got to get things done. And so if you're just doing it for rhetoric or for release or something like that, that's not at all helpful. You have to, the outrage should bring a spotlight with it, and then you shine that spotlight on the issue where you have winning ground. That's why I talk about hate, family, leave being at 84%. It's winning ground for us. If we wanted to fight on
that's true.
We can
Absolutely
win on
is.
it, right? But if you say, hey, listen, we need to get a Supreme Court justice passed, so I need to make X, Y, and Z compromise with Manchin or Sinema. Well, look, in that case, I could live with it. It depends. It depends on what are we compromising on? What's the policy? What's the position? What are we going for? So it's not just a blanket statement of, okay, get rid of them or don't get rid of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I guess
we
like
got 2 other huge topics here. We can do this for a couple minutes.
I'll probably just agree with that.
I'm curious. Has your this was like a major litmus test, I think, for a lot of like media coverage was like the Rittenhouse stuff.
Oh God, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Do you still stand by? Do you feel like? I feel like when I watched the Young Turks and a lot of other people, there were a lot of insane statements coming out and about how like conservatives love to kill people. Conservatives are always looking to kill people. They can't wait to kill. They're constantly looking to kill people.
By the way, those statements are kind of true. Like, conservatives fantasize about that situation to a ridiculous extent, right? Like, about it like, I've changed my opinion, to be fair. I've changed my opinion on how guns fit into the political debate that we're having right now. It, like, just in terms of American politics in general, right? But conservatives are, like, frothing at the mouth in the way that they think about guns, because they're always thinking about it in the context of, like, well, what if insert scenario happens and I need to shoot somebody dead and I become a hero because I killed the bad guy? It's like, dude, your mind goes to the most insane places right away. You know, they're thinking like edgy teens and they're like full-grown adults, supposedly.
We'll get away from it. Like, do you think that like this type of rhetoric or this discussion around what were like largely violent riots that were largely spurred, I think, by like bad media coverage of the original Kenosha shooting of oh God, what was the name of the guy? They got shot in the back several times. Yeah. It like the whole Rittenhouse saga to me was Jacob Blake gets shot and there's bad coverage in the media about it, making it seem like he was just an innocent guy getting in the car to drive away. And then riots happen in Kenosha that get bad media coverage. You've got the CNN, the infamous CNN coverage of, you know, fiery protests, but mostly peaceful in the background. Then you've got Rittenhouse, you know, does his thing, and then we get more bad coverage of that, in my opinion. I think a lot of the facts get misrepresented there in a lot of left-leaning media. And it just feels like we're on this never-ending train of stoking the fires.
You know what? I don't think I need to talk about the Rittenhouse thing. Okay, so the Rittenhouse debate is this weird fucking thing where lefties and leftists will sometimes like conflate what is morally right and wrong with legally right and wrong. Like they'll make the weird assumption, or not weird assumption. They'll operate under the assumption that judges are there as like people who are aware that their job is as a moral arbiter. No, a lot of judges simply are there to be like, okay, is what you did strictly in line or not with what the word of the law says? A lot of judges, quite frankly, being institutionalists, this can be good, this can be bad. They don't care about the spirit of the law. All they care about is the letter, right? This might be more or less the case now than it used to be, but it is an unfortunate fact of the matter that in the case of Rittenhouse, him killing those people was not a violation of state law in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Right? I think that's where he was. Or let's see, where's Kenosha? Fuck, whatever. Whatever state he was in, it was not a violation of the law. It was a violation of, well, a lot of fucking ethical shit, right? Like, it was obviously a very bad thing that he killed people. But legally, he hadn't done anything. He did not transgress the law, apart from, like, being a minor, having illegally acquired a firearm or whatever, and, like, carried it across state lines. That's the Rittenhouse situation, and it sucks, but whatever. That's, you know, that's what the law says. I am going to skip that section because I'm not particularly interested in hearing liberals argue over Rittenhouse in 2023. I don't think it's very politically relevant.
People on the street who are rioting in a city.
He's talking about the riots, blah, blah.
Dark, that we're setting shit on.
There's to the extreme of being shot or pulled over or arrested or something smaller. You've been abused, all of you, tens of millions of you say that, and you've been saying it for 100 years straight. And then we turn around and go, we don't believe you. I think that's deeply offensive. I think it doesn't make sense. I think it's ridiculous. So that's the context in which that riot happens. It doesn't excuse the riot. And by the way, the misreporting, yeah, okay, it turns out he had a knife, but...
Oh, they're talking about the... Okay, this is still Rittenhouse. The fuck?
The cops smelled weed, are comparing this to like the Rittenhouse killings and stuff. And it's like, geez, when all of it gets thrown together, it feels like it's easy to take none of it seriously. And that's the kind of thing that's frustrating to me.
All right, I hear you, but I again, we don't agree.
So, do you have any final closing words or thoughts, remarks, or anything? Or
just look, guys, get in the fight, and by that I mean not like debates and not on the street, but I mean something, if you're frustrated, this is the thing that Stephen and I agree on, right? If you're frustrated, a group built up, looked at area of power leverage, etc., did progressives in the Congress aggressive and make sure that they get paid family leave passed, etc. Help Wolfpack to get corruption out. Anyone.
Okay, he's plugging shit
get
again.
Republicans out of office. I think it'll make a big difference. If you want to vote for progressives, knock yourselves out. But man, get Republicans out of office. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I mean, people can find you guys obviously at the Young Turks. I don't even think I need to point that out. But yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. See you later. Bye.
Okay. Destiny. Yeah, okay, that was a debate. I'll be honest, I didn't expect part of the debate to be like Rittenhouse. How long was that portion?
Insane statements coming out about how like conservatives love to kill people.
Okay.
CNN, the infamous.
Man, that was a good like 25 minutes of the video was just them debating about Kyle Rittenhouse. Well, I guess that's done now. Yeah, so that's what you get when two liberals debate. You get some. Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. Most people who are liberals, like their politics being very much constrained by the system in which we live. I mean, everybody's is to an extent, but them like believing in the system to varying extents in that like, oh, the system is just, we just need to make it work, have a pretty decent understanding of the individual working bits and like, okay, well, this does this and this, like, their institutional knowledge is great. It's good. But at the same, like, at the same time, like, since they have that institutional knowledge, they are able to like engage in the ideas that they're talking about and whatever. But I think where they start to lose out is when there are issues that come up that really come down to like, okay, well, we need to not just change the system, but ultimately transcend it as a framework, right? Like, obviously, socialist critique of liberalism, whatever. There are a couple points in that debate, like when they were talking about like the fight against Republicans. A lot of that comes down to pushing the Democratic Party as left as you can possibly get it. And some of that starts at the local state level. I think they were a little bit too federal brained. They were a little bit too like national brained in that conversation. Because like this stuff takes a lot of time. You know, voting for Democrats at the local level is like a thing you can do. In fact, a lot of the progressivism, a lot of the victories of progressives that has happened, like for me in the politics that I've followed, has come at the local level. Getting people elected to local office. That's probably the easiest way to open up the discussion of progressivism. And it's a little bit more difficult to do that at the federal level because think of it like, you know, I've got what, a congressperson and 2 senators. Like the 2 senators, it's like that's not going to change anytime soon. Unfortunately, I don't like Tim Kaine or Mark Warner very much. I think they're centrist neolibs who are like gigantic corporate sellouts and whatever. And they don't like. There's a lot of policies that I would know that they wouldn't support and whatever. But like at the end of the day, they're so well established that they're not going to have primary opponents, and it's just going to be them versus a Republican. And if they have a Democratic challenger, I would love to vote for that person. And in fact, if I could like support that person, I would want to do it so that each time you get a little bit closer to having a better Democrat than what you had before. But I think that, you know, the vote blue no matter who mantra applies for the general election still. But you should absolutely participate in party primaries, and you should do, like, if you have time to do political activism and whatever, you should do, like, campaigning for progressive candidates. And you should generally, like, try to raise a stink in any way possible about how, like, these policies don't go far enough, that, like, a lot of liberal policy making, right? Because a lot of it is so marginal. You know, like, the child tax credit was great, but it was means tested, and it only affected families with kids. Like, there's a lot of people in this country who are low income but don't have kids. There are a lot of people who are low to mid income and don't have kids. There are a lot of people who are low to mid income who need help and didn't get help from the child tax credit. And on top of that, the child tax credit was temporary. It expired. People no longer get that help. You know, and I think that's where you know, both of these guys, Destiny and Cenk, are need to move, or not need to move left. They need to do, you know, whatever they want to do. It's their life, not mine. That's where I think the discussion needs to be pushed to the left, especially, you know, Cenk. I think Cenk's strong point was when he was arguing in favor of paid family leave and stuff like that, because this is something that every other major like developed nation in the world has. Every other developed nation, some of them not even like developed nations, have this, but we don't for some reason. I mean, I know why. It's because there's such a fucking corporate stranglehold over politics and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of the stuff they were arguing over, Cenk was right that it doesn't just come down to voting for a Democrat. You actually have to vote for a Democrat that's left of the current Democrat or whatever. And you have to sort of... Well, actually, neither of them brought this up. I'll bring it up now. You have to participate in politics in a way that is outside of the electoral framework. You actually, both of these guys are electoralists in different ways. You have to operate outside of that in order to put pressure on politicians to like make that happen, and it's going to be difficult. But a great example of this is, funnily enough, I think the Black Panther Party in Chicago, way back in the '60s, and this is a very LARPy example, but I think it's relevant nonetheless. They saw that there was a problem with poor kids, you know, inner city kids going hungry in the mornings, like they, you know, their family couldn't afford meals. So they organized a free breakfast program. The Black Panther Party did this. Militant Maoist, you know, revolutionaries decided to just set up free breakfast for kids. And then, you know what the city of Chicago did? They created their own program to muscle the Black Panther Party out, because the Black Panther Party was making them look bad for not doing that. And then, of course, once the Black Panther Party stopped doing that, once they were dissolved and whatever, Chicago stopped providing free breakfasts for kids as well, because they obviously didn't care. They just wanted the Black Panthers gone. And that's the sort of thing I'm talking about when I'm saying that, like, establishment Democrats hate progressives more than they hate Republicans, and you know, that sort of diatribe. So it's up to us to keep doing whatever our equivalent is of the Black Panther Party providing free breakfast for kids. Make the Democratic Party look bad for not doing these things in such a way that, like, they have to adopt them. And obviously there's a fine line to be straddled, you know, where you don't want to attack Democrats in such a way that Republicans could weaponize that, right? So that's why you would attack them pretty unambiguously from the left, because Republicans wouldn't want to critique Democrats like that, because you push them on it. Republicans don't like that either. You know, like school lunches. You know? Although, again, I want to reiterate that a lot of these critiques that I have, a lot of the, like, the disdain I have for the Democratic Party mostly applies at the federal level. And, I mean, for Virginia, obviously, at the state level as well. Holy shit, there's a Democratic Party machine in this state. Like no other, just about. But state by state, it varies. Like, you know, you go to the northern Midwest, that's my go-to example. You get a lot of Democrats that are, like, social democratic, you know, or, like, holdovers from a more socialistic version of the party. Yeah. I mean, I said I would watch the whole debate, but I'm going to be honest, I really did not want to hear 25 minutes of liberals talking back and forth about Kyle Rittenhouse. I think the rest of the debate, even with, like, as procedural as some of it was, having to do with, like, Joe Biden and individual politicians and whatever, and like the artifices of policymaking that I sometimes hate engaging with, like, ultimately it was a lot more interesting, because there's, you know, I think there's more to be said there. There's more substantive stuff at stake when you're talking about the margins the Democrats are operating off of in the Senate. And like, even in the frame of electoralism, I think these guys miss something, which is that, like, I think Cenk was right on this, and maybe he just used West Virginia as a bad example. When Democrats run to the center, they lose reliably. I don't know why, like, political analysts keep fucking telling them run to the center and whatever. because it doesn't make them win. It almost lost them the state of New York, or like it got them that much closer to losing the state of New York in the 2022 elections not because of incompetent leadership, because of centrist leadership. The leadership was competent, it just had objectives that led to the Democrats losing power. They like, believe it or not, the 2022 elections were a success for the New York Democratic Party, because the alternative to that was progressives get elected. Like, if they were actually going full on, like, supporting a lot of Democratic candidates or whatever, they would have had to support progressives. But the Democratic Party in New York doesn't want to do that. In fact, they would rather stiff the progressives and let a Republican win than put party money behind a candidate that would have views left of dead center and, like, you know, any shred of economic populism in their blood, you know.